Chapter 294. Pure Young Moon Tour. Moon Palace completed in the boundless starry sky, there was a boundless void, and countless specks of starlight were imprinted into Luo Chunyang's eyes. As he floated there, it was as if he had arrived in a completely different world, a world that was completely different from the primordial world. The vast and boundless feeling that was constantly being produced from various parts of the void caused Luo Chunyang's originally rather harmonious Tao heart to be greatly shocked, and he almost felt as if he could not control his own heart. Behind him, the primordial world that they had originally left had disappeared without a trace, leaving only a boundless darkness behind him. In the face of such a boundless starry sky, Luo Chunyang felt extremely insignificant, and an indescribable sense of reverence welled up in his mind. As he floated there, Luo Chunyang's mind was stirred, and he did his best to find an adjective to describe the boundless starry sky before him, which seemed to be another world. However, he discovered that what emerged from his memories was actually a passage of profound syllables that was equivalent to thousands of words. This passage of syllables was extremely profound, and its complexity was as if millions of people were speaking at the same time. Its simplicity and straightforwardness was like the sound of breathing in and out, indescribably wonderful. This passage of syllables was the passage that Luo Fan had passed on to him that contained the Khanate Tao. After this passage emerged from the depths of Luo Chunyang's memories, he knew that his opportunity had arrived, and he hurriedly carefully read through these scriptures. In the end, although he was still unable to comprehend any profound martial Tao from these scriptures, he felt as if he had comprehended some kind of indescribable Tao profundity. Unfortunately, this Tao profundity was blurry, and could not be described or recalled. Afterwards, he only knew that he had understood something and comprehended something, but he could not remember exactly what he had comprehended. After Guang Pu had refined the Khanate inextinguishable spirit light, she had established some kind of mysterious connection with the moon in the depths of the boundless starry sky. As soon as she entered the boundless starry sky, she instantly sensed the location of the moon, and instantly knew how to choose a direction to advance in to reach the moon as quickly as possible. Just as she had determined the direction, an extremely strange sound suddenly rang out from her son, Luo Chunyang's body. Guang Pu was startled and turned her head to look. Luo Chunyang floated in the air, his body floating naturally. However, there seemed to be some sort of unbelievable reaction going on inside his body. Strange syllables kept coming out from within. These strange syllables were very mysterious. They seemed to be the syllables produced by the vibration of Luo Chunyang's internal organs and bones, and also seemed to be the sound of the great Tao produced by the heavens and earth. Suddenly, an inexplicable sense of familiarity flowed through Guang Pu's mind. These sounds seemed to have the same effect as some of the mysteries of heaven and earth that she had comprehended through different means. It was as if some of the mysteries of heaven and earth that she had comprehended had been forcibly converted into syllables. Is this the mystery of the scripture that Master taught me? Such a thought flashed through Guang Pu's mind. When Luo Fan had passed the scripture to Luo Fu, he had repeated it more than 100 times. Naturally, Guang Pu had remembered the scripture and knew that it contained mysteries. At this moment, Luo Chunyang did not feel that his body was producing such sounds. He was only quietly comprehending the scripture, which was equivalent to thousands of words. He slowly rotated the scripture in his mind, trying his best to grasp the feeling of enlightenment that he had previously felt. Unfortunately, this feeling was fleeting. After appearing for a moment, it did not appear again. No matter how hard he tried, the scripture remained meaningless and complicated syllables. After a long time, Luo Chunyang sighed and woke up from that state of comprehension. As he woke up, the strange syllables that were constantly being produced from within his body also disappeared, as if they had never appeared. Luo Chunyang moved his mind and sensed the innate door that was floating above his head. It was extremely sturdy, and even if he used all his strength to attack it, it would not budge. He could not help but be overjoyed when he sensed it. This was because he could feel that although the door was still sturdy, it seemed to be weaker than before. It's working! Looks like the scripture that grandfather taught me is really unbelievably mysterious. If I work hard to comprehend this scripture, I will definitely be able to break open the door as soon as possible. Luo Chunyang's mind flashed with inspiration. As he thought about it, he gradually regained his senses. He looked around and saw Guang Pu looking at him with a smile on her face. Her eyes seemed to be filled with satisfaction and gratification. With one look, Luo Chunyang knew that his performance just now had entered the eyes of his mother. Moreover, his mother was also quite satisfied. He couldn't help but feel happy and said, "Mom, I just had an epiphany. I'm one step closer to breaking through the Xiantian gate." Good, good, good. You must cultivate well so that you won't let master down. Guang Pu smiled. Luo Chunyang smiled and nodded. Guang Pu faintly smiled. She raised her hand and a silver light rushed out from her hand. In an instant it spread out and wrapped around the three of them in the silver light. After the silver light wrapped around the three of them, it suddenly flashed. As if it had teleported, it brought the three of them to a very ordinary direction in the void. It was the direction where the moon was located in the endless starry sky. Guang Pu had already attained the Earth Immortal's Tao fruit and could already be said to have remarkable powers. In the endless starry sky, she used her powers and brought Luo Chunyang and Luo Guo to the front of a huge planet in just half a day. This planet emitted an endless amount of lunar essence. The chilly air could be felt even from millions of miles away. The various cultivation methods that Luo Fan taught were all directed towards the Great Tao. There was no such thing as a certain cultivation method that could only absorb a certain type of energy. As long as there was enough energy and yuan qi, then no matter what type of energy or yuan qi it was, the various cultivation methods that Luo Fan taught could be used to absorb and refine it into one's own strength. Different types of energy and yuan qi produced different results. The only difference was the conversion rate of these energies and yuan qi into one's own strength. The cultivation method that Luo Chunyang cultivated was naturally the same. Although the lunar essence was an extreme yin qi and he had a pure yang body, he could still absorb it. After half a day, Guang Pu had already brought Luo Chunyang to a void more than 3 million miles away from the moon. From here, they could already see the huge moon. They could also feel the endless lunar essence emitted by the moon and the endless chilly air and rich energy it contained. That is the true body of the moon. My son, can you withstand the pressure of such rich lunar essence? Guang Pu asked Luo Chunyang worriedly. Mom, don't worry. Although I have a pure yang body, the cultivation technique that grandfather passed down to me is extremely profound. This lunar essence is also extremely beneficial to me. You don't have to worry that I won't be able to withstand it. Luo Chunyang said with a smile. That's good. Then let's go over. Guang Pu relaxed and said. Okay. I can't wait. Luo Chunyang said with a slight excitement. Silly child. Guang Pu shook her head and smiled. As she said that, she did not hesitate. With a thought, the silver light reappeared and enveloped the three of them. Then, with a jolt, they rushed forward. In just a few breaths, they had traveled more than 3 million miles and arrived directly on the surface of the moon. To a certain extent, the area within 3 million miles of the moon could already be considered as above the moon. After refining the connate inextinguishable spiritual light, Guang Pu had extremely strong control over the moon. Within this area, she was naturally extremely powerful. With a thought, she could move through the void. Therefore, she could travel millions of miles at such a fast speed. Arriving on the moon, Luo Chunyang's body naturally emitted a strong wave of pure yang qi. This wave of pure yang qi was like a blazing fire, circling around his body in a 3-foot radius. The lunar essence on the moon was more than 10,000 times more concentrated than the one a few million miles away. With such dense lunar essence, even Luo Fan, who had just attained Dao fruit, had to release his power to resist it. However, to Luo Chunyang, who had a pure yang body, such a chilly lunar essence could only make him release pure yang qi. It could not affect him at all. Furthermore, due to the influence of the extremely dense and cold lunar essence, his pure yang qi was constantly being tempered, constantly increasing the degree of its purity and density. This showed how mysterious Luo Chunyang's pure yang body was. After arriving on the moon, Guang Pu had been paying attention to Luo Chunyang at all times. At this moment, when she saw Luo Chunyang release pure yang qi without a trace of unease, she heaved a sigh of relief and relaxed. "This is a good place. No wonder you could stay here for so many years, Mom." Luo Chunyang took a deep breath and sighed. After arriving on the moon, he felt that the power of the 9 heaven-sun transformation technique in his body had become extremely active and agile. It seemed that the speed of its circulation had increased a lot. Obviously, this place had unimaginable benefits for him to practice the 9 heaven-sun transformation technique. Water and fire complemented each other, and yin and yang generated each other. "Come on, I'll show you the real mystery of the moon." Mentioning that she had not returned for so many years, Guang Pu could not help but feel ashamed and said with a wry smile. As she spoke, with a single thought, the space above the moon began to change. As the void moved, Guang Pu, Luo Chunyang, and Luo Guo had already arrived at the center of the moon, in the middle of the mysterious and extremely gorgeous three-dimensional talisman. Looking at the countless complicated energy lines around him that almost made him dizzy, Luo Chunyang was shocked and did not know how to react. After a long time, he let out a long breath and said, "The mysteries of heaven and earth are really innumerable. My cultivation is still too low, too low." In cultivation, you must not be complacent because of the power you have. Anyone and any cultivation is insignificant in front of the Great Way. Don't forget. Guang Pu sighed and said with her heart touched. These words were not only for Luo Chunyang to hear, but also for herself to hear. Although she had mastered the whole moon and could control it to the greatest extent, in the face of this huge and complicated three-dimensional talisman in front of her, she still felt that there were countless mysteries in it that she did not understand. She felt that if she carefully understood this three-dimensional talisman, she could understand countless mysteries of the Great Way, which could push her cultivation to an unimaginable level. Because of this, she just said those words out of feeling. Luo Chunyang was enlightened. Seeing Luo Chunyang's nervous expression, Guang Pu knew that she was overreacting. She could not help but smile and said, "Okay, Master has already allowed me to build a cave abode here. I will build a cave abode now, so that I don't have to live in this place in the future. That would not be nice." As she spoke, her mind moved. In the void, the three of them returned to the surface of the moon. Standing on the ground, seeing that Guang Pu's expression had returned to before, Luo Chunyang's expression relaxed. However, he did not speak again. Guang Pu looked around and waved her hand. Countless changes occurred on the ground of the moon. Countless solids of the moon left the ground and shot up into the sky. As the huge amount of solids left the ground below became flat at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, the ground within a radius of 3,000 miles became as smooth as a mirror. It was even able to reflect one's figure. Guang Pu waved her hand. With a thought, the void above the moon changed endlessly. Waves of invisible power appeared out of thin air and acted on the solids of the moon that Guang Pu had fixed in midair. With the effects of this invisible power, the solids of the moon kept changing forms. In the process, they kept fusing and piling up. Not long after, they turned into countless orderly pillars, slabs, stones, tiles, sculptures. After these solids changed forms, they seemed to be alive. In an instant, they fell in different but complementary ways. In the blink of an eye, a tall and majestic, but very familiar palace was built in front of the three of them. Infinite Void Palace? Seeing this palace, Luo Chunyang could not help but exclaim, "This is the Heaven and Earth Moon Palace." Guangpu smiled and said. As she spoke, she waved her hand. On both sides of the palace's main door was a pair of couplets. When the osmanthus blossoms, the fragrant clouds form a sea. High above the moon there is a house in the vast cold. Above the couplets were three complicated words created by Pangu, Heaven and Earth Moon Palace. The reason why Luo Chunyang said that this was the Everlasting Void Palace was because this palace was too similar to the Everlasting Void Palace. That squarish shape, that majestic aura, that aura that was constantly emitted was exactly the same as the limitless Void Palace. If there was anything different, it would be the plaque at the main door. How is it? Does it feel familiar? This is something that I specifically built according to Master's magic treasure. Although it's not as profound as Master's magic treasure, I've still done my best. In the future, if I work hard to cultivate the Tao of time and space, I might be able to change the flow of time here. Guangpu sighed. Mom. Luo Chunyang finally understood why Guangpu built the Moon Palace like this. She wanted to make this place a place that he was familiar with. He could not help but feel touched. Why do you and I have to be like this? Come with me. I have a lot of decorations in here. Guangpu smiled. As she spoke, she held Gur and pulled Luo Chunyang into the Moon Palace. After entering the door, what they saw was not a room, but a small valley. This valley was filled with smoke and mist, and there was a dense primal energy circulating in the valley. The endless smoke was produced because the chaotic energy was too dense. All the primordial chi in the world had a common origin, which was chaos. In this case, all the primordial chi in the world could naturally be converted under certain conditions. Guangpu's control over the moon surpassed everything. It was naturally very easy for her to convert the endless lunar essence into chaotic chi. She could even do it with a thought. The Moon Palace seemed to be built simply from the solid lunar essence, but in fact it was engraved with a complicated and mysterious formation. This formation had the ability to open up the void and convert the lunar essence. It was precisely because of this formation that there was such a vast space within the vast cold palace and such dense chaotic energy pervading the air. It was a pity that Guangpu's grasp of the Tao of time and space was not as good as Luo Fan's. Although her control over the moon reduced the difficulty of changing the space here by more than 10 times, she still could not change the flow of time in the Moon Palace. This caused the level of the cave abode to be greatly improved. It was a bit of a fly in the ointment. Luo Chunyang looked at the scene inside the Moon Palace, and an indescribable warmth surged in his heart. Living in that valley was the happiest time of his life. That kind of carefree life, that kind of life where he could see his father and mother at all times, was really like a dream. This place is really great, Luo Chunyang praised. His body turned into an afterimage as he quickly rushed towards the place where the manor should have been in the valley. When he arrived there, the manor that he was extremely familiar with was indeed there. There was no difference between a grain of sand or a stone. It was as if the entire manor had been moved here. Luo Chunyang even saw the traces left behind when he was naughty and playful as a child in a hidden corner. Guangpu looked at Luo Chunyang's actions and did not stop him. A faint smile appeared on her face. She raised her hand and waved. 10 solid lunar essence rose from the ground and came before her. Seeing the 10 solid lunar essence, Guangpu's eyes flashed, and 10 strange three-dimensional patterns appeared in the void. These patterns instantly sank into the 10 pieces of solid lunar essence. With a turn, they turned into 3 layers of restrictions within the solid lunar essence. Chapter 295. The Root of the Soul, the Foundation of the Mind. The 10 boys and girls that had just been refined were the yellow-turbaned strongmen that Guangpu had refined with the help of the strongman summoning technique passed down by Luo Fan. The structure of these yellow-turban warriors was extremely exquisite. Although due to the limitations of the materials, The number of restrictions in their bodies could only be increased to 10 no matter how hard they were refined. It was enough for Guang Pu. Okay, you should know what to do. Go now. When Guang Pu refined these yellow-turbaned strongmen, she had already engraved their tasks in the core of their restrictions. At this time, there was no need for specific arrangements. She just waved her hand gently and said. Sure enough, with her words, the 10 yellow-turbaned strongmen scattered and got busy in the valley in an orderly manner. This valley was quite huge. Although there were many phantoms of living beings specially condensed by Guang Pu, they were fake after all. The entire valley seemed very empty and a little dead silent. At this moment, these yellow-turbaned strongmen were busy, but it added a lot of vitality to the valley. Although it still seemed a little empty and dead silent, it was much better than before. After that, Guang Pu and Luo Chunyang stayed in the valley inside the Guanghan Palace to cultivate attentively. However, every other year, Guang Pu would use her supernatural power to send Luo Chunyang to the space-time illusion at the foot of the primordial world's Buzhou Mountain. She let Luo Chunyang accept the inspection or guidance of Luo Fan's clone magic tool. These were later stories, let's not talk about it. On the northwest pillar of the primordial world, after Luo Fan finished explaining some dharma to Luo Chunyang, his body turned into a long rainbow and shot toward a certain place in the depths of the primordial world. The speed of this long rainbow was extremely fast. In the end, it only left an afterimage that was tens of thousands of meters long in the air. Luo Fan's destination was extremely far away. Although he flew at a speed that left afterimages in the air, it took him 3 days to travel more than 300 billion kilometers. Finally, he arrived at a location near the depths of the primordial world. There was a vast swamp with a radius of more than 60 million kilometers here. This swamp was always shrouded by a thin layer of black mist. Moreover, there was an indescribable stench coming from every part of the swamp, spreading in all directions. The stench made the air within 10,000 miles of the swamp, which had a circumference of over 60 million miles, extremely unpleasant. Luo Fan, who had transformed into a streak of light, arrived within the range of the swamp and shook. Then, the streak of light condensed and his figure appeared more than 12,000 li above the swamp. Floating quietly above the swamp, Luo Fan faintly sensed the stench coming from below. He nodded to himself, and a thought flashed through his mind. The number 1 poisonous creature in the untainted world is indeed here. The reason why Luo Fan came here was that he needed a poisonous creature to cultivate a magical power. Although there were countless unimaginable poisonous creatures in the primordial world, the best was here, in the depths of a swamp that was more than 300 billion kilometers away from Buzhou Mountain. He gently raised his hand and waved. In the blink of an eye, countless innate qi gathered and instantly formed a circular qi shield that covered his body. At this moment, the stench that enveloped the entire swamp was formed by the poisonous gas that leaked from the poisonous creature. If he inhaled a little, even Luo Fan would feel uncomfortable. After protecting his body with the help of the barrier, his body sank, and he brought the barrier with him straight down into the area where the stench spread for thousands of miles above the sky. Luo Fan had long speculated the source of the poisonous creature. Now that he had descended, he naturally would not run around like a headless fly. He directly wanted to go to the center of the swamp. He was extremely fast. In just a short while, he had crossed tens of millions of kilometers and arrived at the place where the stench was the strongest. Here, the incomparably strong stench had already condensed into a solid substance, like a black pillar directly rising from the depths of the earth, shooting up into the sky from an unknown place. When the stench first came out of the ground, it condensed like a solid, but the higher it went, the more dispersed it became. When it reached a height of 9,000 kilometers above the ground, it had completely dispersed, forming an umbrella-shaped cloud. It also looked like a huge mushroom cloud. Fortunately, this is the beginning of the primordial world. If it was at any other time, Such an abnormality would have already aroused the curiosity of countless people. How could it wait for me to collect it? Seeing this scene, Luo Fan's mind flashed with a trace of relief. With a thought, he turned into a conveyance light and rushed into the stench. The innate qi shield around his body was specially set up to isolate the stench. Although the stench here was so strong that it almost condensed into a substance, it was nothing to the qi shield. Even if he went against the source of the stench, he could not smell a trace of the stench. Going against the stench, Luo Fan sank down. Soon, he was already more than 30,000 kilometers above the ground. There was a huge black sphere here. It was 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times darker than the blackest ink in the world. This sphere had a diameter of 100,000 feet. It possessed an extremely strange power. This power was formless and incorporeal, as if it did not exist. However, it possessed an extremely powerful might. It could expel the boundless energy of the earth, the sand, the soil, and the lava of the earth, causing a void that was 1,000,000 feet in diameter to appear around the black sphere. This black sphere was the source of the stench that filled the entire swamp. It was also the place where the first poison in the primordial world was located. Luo Fan turned around and reappeared from the conveyance light. He floated hundreds of thousands of feet away from the black sphere. Suddenly, his mind moved slightly. He raised his hand and pointed above him. As he pointed, a faint golden light suddenly appeared in the void in the direction he was pointing at. The golden light became bigger and more obvious. Not long after, it had become an enormous golden ball with a diameter of 10,000 feet. The golden ball emitted countless gentle golden lights. Although the golden light was gentle, it had an extremely strong penetrating power. It illuminated the entire spherical space with a diameter of 100,000 feet. This golden ball was condensed by Luo Fan by converting the countless poisonous gas that filled the place into the true fire of the sun. Under the light emitted by the true fire of the sun, the walls of the spherical space with a diameter of 100,000 feet emitted wisps of black fog. At the same time, there were strange chirping sounds coming from the walls. The walls solidified and faded at a speed visible to the naked eye. As expected, this swamp with a radius of 60 million miles was indeed formed by the power of this poisonous creature. Luo Fan understood when he saw this. With a thought, he raised his hand and grabbed at the air. An invisible giant hand appeared out of thin air and grabbed at the black ball with a diameter of 100,000 feet. Under the shadow of the giant hand, the huge black ball was like a ping-pong ball in the hands of an ordinary person. It seemed light and small. At this moment, a soft snort sounded out of thin air. Following that, Luo Fan felt a figure rushing over at a speed that seemed to have teleported hundreds of millions of miles away. Although this speed could not compare to Luo Fan's full-strength flight, it was still much faster than Luo Fan's normal speed. It was even much faster than the flying speed of Hong Jun and the others. Who dares to take what this sovereign has taken a fancy to? Although that person was tens of millions of miles away, his voice was strangely transmitted underground. Luo Fan thought for a moment, a golden and silver light flashed in his eyes, and he already knew the secret behind it. This was because this person had been here before and had left a mind stigma here. At this moment, the person who spoke was not the person who was tens of millions of miles away, but the mind stigma that was left in this spherical space that was trembling. Because of the great calamity of the primordial world in tens of thousands of years, Luo Fan was determined to gather all the power he could to fight against the invasion of the incarnation realm in the future. Therefore, although this person's words were extremely rude, Luo Fan still endured it. He raised his hand and retracted the giant hand shadow. He said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that this item had already been reserved by fellow Taoist. May I ask how I should address you?" As he spoke, the person had already traversed tens of millions of miles, broke through the thick ground, and arrived in this spherical space that was 100,000 feet in diameter. Luo Fan took a closer look and saw that this person was an innate god. His entire body was emitting an aura that only an innate god could have. He was 100 feet tall, with 4 faces, 8 hands, and 6 legs. His body was covered in armor that was very strange, but it was obvious that it had been refined countless times. Because his body was constantly emitting a strange aura, although his figure was so strange, he did not look very ugly. Instead, he looked very powerful. After observing this person's cultivation, Luo Fan found that this person had actually achieved the Tao. Even his cultivation was comparable to the realm of true immortals after achieving the earthly immortal realm. He could be considered as the strongest innate god that Luo Fan had seen in the primordial world. Humph! Don't try to be friends with me. Since you dare to covet my things, then leave me a body of Tao power. The 4 faces above the head of the innate god spoke at the same time. As he spoke, his body swayed and his 8 hands opened up to grab the air. In an instant, a large black curtain suddenly appeared, covering the sky and the earth, and wrapped around Luo Fan. Luo Fan frowned. This innate god was really too unreasonable. Fine, I'll let him experience the cultivation realm that is higher than him. With that thought in mind, he raised a hand and pointed a finger forward. Countless mysterious runes flashed past his finger. Then, a tremendous force suddenly appeared out of thin air. This force landed on the black screen that covered the sky and covered the earth with a loud rumble. This black curtain was condensed by a kind of extremely pure poison. Any living creature, even the innate god raised by the heaven and earth, would be poisoned or at least lose any ability to resist as long as it touched them. It could be said that this poison had reached the Tao. From a simple poison, it was sublimated to a certain law in the primordial world. It could lead the power of heaven and earth to attack the opponent at any time. The moment Luo Fan's rune guided the power of the void to come into contact with the black curtain, the mysteries of the poison contained in the black curtain flashed through his mind. He actually used poison to prove his Tao. Unfortunately, this method seems to be incomplete. Although he can achieve the poison body of immortality, it is too extreme. Now it should be the limit. Luo Fan secretly sighed. Using poison to prove the Tao, even on the original Earth, he had never heard of this method. After coming to this primordial world, there was naturally no such method of using poison to prove the Tao among the infinite magic skills and magic arts created with the help of Pengu's primordial spirit. Therefore, this method was quite novel to Luo Fan. It was something he had never thought of before, and it made his mind flash with a little inspiration. Instantly, he had many ideas about the poison scroll in the Tao fruit scripture. Good. Even if I can't get the first poison of the primordial world this time, this harvest is worth it. Luo Fan felt the change in his mind, and he could not help but be overjoyed. Although the method of using poison to prove the Tao was mysterious, Luo Fan was already qualified to seek the Tai Tao fruit. Compared to the innate god who had just stepped into the realm of true immortality, he was tens of thousands of times stronger. The power of the void guided by the runes he released was unimaginably strong, but it was not something that the innate god in front of him could resist. In an instant, the invisible power directly tore the black curtain into pieces. Although the innate god's cultivation level was extremely high, and he also cultivated the Tao technique with infinite lethality, he had very little experience in fighting with others. Previously, he thought that the poison sky curtain he released would definitely be able to subdue the living creature in front of him, whose cultivation level could not be seen through but was definitely weaker than him. However, he did not expect such a sudden change. He could not react in time, and his mind was slightly sluggish. When cultivators fought, they could make countless attacks in an instant. The innate god's sluggishness was simply sending himself to be attacked. Luo Fan raised his hand and the void power directly rushed out, locking the innate god's whole body and even the poisoned soul in his mud-pill palace tightly. This made the innate god completely lose the ability to move and resist. Even his thoughts were deliberately released by Luo Fan because he wanted to communicate with him. Because you attacked as soon as you came and did not listen to me, I had no choice but to attack. If I have neglected you, please forgive me, fellow Taoist, Luo Fan said sincerely. Humph! You snatched this sacred body, which is equivalent to snatching the foundation of my Tao. What reason do you have? The innate god showed a look of impatience. For this innate god, the first poison of the primordial world was indeed divine and holy. Since this item is so important to you, why don't you take it away? Since it is placed here, and you did not tell everyone in the world about it, it is not too much for me to take it. Luo Fan sighed. How can the sacred body move when it is not perfected? I have already greatly affected it by collecting enough poison power to refine it into a poisoned soul. If I move it again, it will definitely lose the possibility of advancing further. This is a sin, how can I do it? The innate god said matter-of-factly. Luo Fan frowned and raised his hand to calculate. In an instant, countless lights and shadows flashed across his mind. Suddenly, he understood what the innate god meant. After understanding, he could not help but smile bitterly. The first poison of the primordial world could indeed grow further, but it would need to wait for countless periods. When it absorbed all the primordial qi in the primordial world and became billions of times stronger, it could turn the entire primordial world into a poison domain. At that time, all the living beings in the primordial world would either die or be converted into living beings that lived on poison. When it is perfected, the primordial world can be turned into a poison domain. I wonder if you know that? Luo Fan shook his head and said, Of course I know that. My goal is to turn the primordial world into a poison domain. At that time, poison will reign supreme in the world. Even the heavenly Tao of the primordial world will be subdued by it. How wonderful would that be? Ha ha! The innate god laughed out loud. Golden and silver light flashed in Luo Fan's eyes. The great sun golden eyes and the bright moon silver eyes covered the innate god in front of him. In an instant, the innate god, from the inside to the outside, from the top to the bottom, from the divine soul to the body, and even his past and future were revealed in Luo Fan's eyes without any reservation. Traces of it flowed through his mind and thoughts. It turns out that he has been assimilated by the power of poison. His mind is no longer normal. What a pity! After seeing it clearly, Luo Fan sighed. The innate god in front of him seemed to have infinite power and obtained immortality. However, his essence, the core of his divine soul, had been completely penetrated by the power of poison. His mind had been completely controlled by the power of poison. He was no longer independent. The cultivation of any living being was to absorb all kinds of power to refine themselves, improve their cultivation realm, and make their origin compatible with the mysteries of the great Tao. In the end, they would condense supreme power and stand at the top of the world. However, no matter what kind of power they condensed, no matter how they transformed themselves, their origin, the source of their consciousness, and the core of their divine soul must remain independent. They could use the power, but they could not be assimilated by it. Once the source of a living being's consciousness and the core of its divine soul were assimilated by the external power, the living being would become a slave of the power and lose its freedom, just like the innate god in front of him. Abnormal mind? You are the one with abnormal mind. I am the ancestor of all poisons in the world. In the future, when the primordial world becomes a poison domain, I will be the supreme monarch of the primordial world. I will control the fate of all living beings in the primordial world. Ha ha! The innate god laughed loudly. Luo Fan did not want to listen to the crazy words of the innate god anymore. He raised his hand and covered the innate god. His magic power shook slightly. The endless poisonous gas in the 100,000 feet spherical space was quickly converted into the true fire of the sun. It condensed crazily, and in the blink of an eye, it had turned into a huge character that was tens of thousands of feet high. This character was the word seal, created by Pangu. It was made up of countless threads of the true fire of the sun, which were so tiny that they were almost undetectable. They were complicated, mysterious, and extremely tiny three-dimensional talismans. After this character was formed, he patted the void. This seal suddenly rushed out, wrapped up, and completely integrated into the body of the innate god in front of him. Instantly, countless complicated and mysterious runes flashed on the surface of the innate god's body. Then, it gradually turned into a golden statue, quietly floating in the void like a dead thing. Chapter 296. Dark Incarnation Divine Sense. After taking away the sealed innate deity, Luo Fan's face involuntarily showed a look of disappointment. An innate deity who had reached the perfected immortal realm would be an extremely important force in the great tribulation of the untainted land tens of thousands of years later. If he could join the untainted land, his chances of winning would be greatly increased. It was a pity that such a powerful innate deity had lost his mind and self. He could not be an effective force on the untainted land at all. Instead, he might become an obstacle on the untainted land. It was such a pity. Perhaps it will be a good thing to throw him into the spirit space to be reincarnated continuously. However, I don't know how many reincarnations he will have to go through before he can recover himself. Perhaps he will never recover. Luo Fan sighed. Tens of thousands of years should be millions of years in the spirit space. If it was calculated by one life in 100 years, millions of years should be enough for a living being to be reincarnated for tens of thousands of times. The power of so many reincarnations would be an extremely terrifying force. It might be able to purify the core of the spirit soul and the root of the mind. However, Luo Fan did not have much confidence in this. After all, the spirit soul was the most core existence of a living being. Moreover, this living being was an innate deity who had cultivated to the perfected immortal realm. The core of his spirit soul and the root of the mind had reached an incredible level. Although the power of tens of thousands of reincarnations was strong, Luo Fan did not have much confidence in how much effect it could have on his spirit soul. The reason why he decided to throw the innate deity into the spirit space to be reincarnated was that he felt it was a pity for the innate deity's power. He was unwilling to waste the power of the innate deity. After deciding what to do with the innate deity, Luo Fan turned his attention to the number one poisonous creature in the untainted land behind him. Through the innate deity, Luo Fan had a deeper understanding of the power of this poisonous creature. He knew that the power of the number one poisonous creature in the untainted land was probably beyond his imagination, but he did not dare to be as careless as before. With a slight thought, the earth immortal Tao fruit in his dantian collapsed with a loud bang, then instantly reformed. During this process, 81 units of magic power left his Tao fruit of earthly immortal and quickly circulated in his body through his meridians along a mysterious and unpredictable route. At the same time, a mysterious and unfathomable mantra flowed through his mind, producing some kind of mysterious and unfathomable effect in his body. After the 81 magical power units had circulated 81 times around that mysterious route, under the effect of the mental cultivation method mnemonic chant that flowed through his mind, they underwent some kind of indescribable transformation. Its size had increased by tens of thousands of times, and its nature had undergone a tremendous change. In the blink of an eye, it had transformed into a clear stream of air. Immediately thereafter, the stream of azure qi abruptly rushed out of his palm. Luo Fan raised his hand and made a seal. The clear qi fell with a loud bang, covering the black ball that was 100,000 feet in diameter in front of him. The clear qi quickly condensed, twisted, and entangled in the air. Soon, it turned into a sphere made of 81 complicated three-dimensional talismans, instantly enveloping the black ball in the center of the space that represented the number 1 poisonous creature in the untainted land. Just as the sphere formed by the 81 three-dimensional talisman seals wrapped around the black ball, a mysterious and terrifying force was suddenly produced. From the inside of the black ball, it suddenly burst out from the center of the black ball. It rushed towards the huge three-dimensional talisman seal sphere around it at the speed of light, and collided with it without any obstruction. Woo-woo! Swoosh, swoosh! An extremely strange sound that seemed to contain some kind of incredible mystery erupted the moment the mysterious force and the three-dimensional talisman sphere came into contact. This voice was like the roar of hundreds of millions of living beings at the same time, screaming at the same time. Even Luo Fan, who had a profound cultivation, felt that his eardrums had received a great shock, and his Tao heart had received a great impact. It is indeed not simple. I didn't expect it to have hidden so deeply. It seems that it is almost about to give birth to intelligence and become a different kind of connate life form. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. The sphere made of 81 magical power units that he had released was a huge seal. The principle contained in the seal itself was not inconceivable and profound. In fact, it was just a simple application of the seal principle recorded in the seal scroll of Luo Fan's Tao Fruit Tao scripture. However, at that moment, after the seal was added with Luo Fan's magical power units, its power was so strong that it could even seal a connate god of the perfected immortal realm. Its power could be said to be boundless and unimaginable. However, when the first poison of the primordial world exerted its power, such a powerful seal seemed to be unable to withstand it. Luo Fan even felt that the seal was about to collapse. This was enough to prove that the power of the first poison of the primordial world that Luo Fan had previously deduced was not complete. But it's a pity. No matter what, your nature has determined that you are born to be incompatible with all the other connate god. If you are allowed to really grow, you will definitely become a disaster in the primordial world. I'm sorry. As Luo Fan spoke, he raised his hand and pressed down. The huge ball-shaped seal suddenly produced an incomparably terrifying force. Under the pressure of this huge force, the black sphere shook a few times and burst out a strange sound that was even stronger, louder, and more mysterious than before. Finally, there was no more movement, but it had been completely subdued. Without the power that obstructed it, the clear seal could completely take effect on the black sphere. In an instant, the black sphere was compressed more than 10,000 times by the seal, and its shape was completely changed, turning into a very strange beast. This beast had 1 head and 100 feet. It was shaped like a centipede, but it had a wolf's head. Although its outline was blurry and its shape was rough, like a clay sculpture made by a child, it constantly emitted a fierce and brutal aura, letting people know that this thing was not a good thing. Luo Fan raised his hand and waved, and the strange beast sculpture that had been sealed by the clear seal came to his hand. With a thought, he opened the heaven and earth in his sleeve and put it into it. As this thing disappeared, the cave wall, which had been releasing wisps of black mist after being illuminated by the light of the true sun fire, suddenly trembled. An incomparably huge cloud of black mist surged out of the cave wall like a broken dam, and in the blink of an eye, it drowned the spherical space with a diameter of 100,000 feet. Other than the golden sphere formed by the true sun fire and the 3 feet around Luo Fan, the entire space was completely covered by the black fog. With just one look, Luo Fan knew that this was the poison power emitted by the number 1 poison in the primordial world. Due to the loss of the origin, it began to seep out from the surrounding ground again. He was not surprised. With a move, he had already turned into a ray of light and rushed up. Soon, he was already on the ground. Looking down, he saw that the fog that had originally filled a radius of 60 million miles had gradually dissipated. The swamp below was also slowly solidifying. Although the solidification speed was extremely slow, according to this speed, the radius of 60 million miles would definitely become a vast and flat land after a few thousand years. It would begin to produce heavenly materials and earthly treasures that were difficult to find in the future. The true sunfire was left by Luo Fan in the spherical space with a diameter of 100,000 feet, which had seeped out from 30,000 miles underground. It constantly emitted a gentle light and an extremely masculine power. The true sunfire was only condensed by Luo Fan casually from the poisonous gas of the number 1 poison in the primordial world. It was not something precious, so Luo Fan did not have any intention of taking it back. Therefore, he left it there and let it shine on the surrounding cave walls, allowing it to continuously assimilate the poisonous gas that had fused into the cave walls. As a result, the purification speed of the radius of 60 million miles could be sped up. If it were not for the true sunfire, it would probably take at least tens of thousands of years for the large swamp to be finally purified. In the end, it would turn into a normal land and produce all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures again. With a thought, Luo Fan turned into a long rainbow and headed straight for Buzhou Mountain. 3 days later, Luo Fan had crossed a distance of more than 300 billion miles and arrived at Buzhou Mountain in the northwest sky pillar. Arriving here, Luo Fan directly landed on the sea of liquefied primordial qi that had already accumulated a small part of the top of Buzhou Mountain. At this moment, the entire Buzhou Mountain was wrapped in a layer of rich primordial qi. The rich primordial qi surged up from all parts of Buzhou Mountain at an extremely fast speed, constantly injecting into the sea of liquefied primordial qi at the top of Buzhou Mountain. Under the boundless pressure of heaven and earth, the primordial qi turned from its original gaseous state into a liquid state and blended into the sea without any loss. Standing on the sea, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved. From the depths of the sea of liquefied primordial qi, an earthy yellow light flashed. Then, a square palace with a diameter of 100 feet rushed out of the sea of liquefied primordial qi and came directly in front of Luo Fan. This was the Limitless Void Palace. Luo Fan raised his hand and the gate of the Limitless Void Palace opened with a loud bang. Then, a spacious palace with numerous towering pillars appeared in front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan directly stepped into it. The gate of the Limitless Void Palace closed again. A feeling of being in control of everything welled up in Luo Fan's heart. "Where is the boy?" Luo Fan lightly shouted. Along with his shout, a human-shaped relief in the center of the palace suddenly shook and separated from the roof. In a flash, it arrived in front of Luo Fan and loudly fell down, condensing into the appearance of a young man. This was the Limitless Boy, who had fused with the entire medium-class world and constantly stabilized and refined the medium-class world. Limitless Boy is here to listen to Master's orders. The Limitless Boy came in front of Luo Fan and bowed. "Send this person into the minor kiliacosm to be reincarnated. This person is very dangerous. You need to look after him from time to time. Don't let him recover his memory of this life. Otherwise, I'm afraid this minor kiliacosm can't trap him." Luo Fan raised his hand and took out the golden seal of the innate deity who had achieved the Tao by using poison and gave it to the Limitless Boy. When the Limitless Boy heard this, he expressionlessly received the seal. After bowing, he turned around and directly merged with the space. He didn't need to go through the portal to enter the minor kiliacosm. As for how to send the innate deity into the samsara and how to look after him from time to time, this was not what Luo Fan needed to care about. It's a pity that although he has been refining for such a long time, there is still no sign of advancement. Seeing the performance of the Limitless Boy, Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh. The Limitless Boy was the treasure spirit of the Limitless Void Palace. He had consciousness, emotions, wisdom, and thoughts, but he didn't have a self. If the Limitless Void Palace was promoted, not only would the power of this magic treasure be greatly enhanced, but the minor chiliocosm inside would also become more stable and the medium chiliocosm would become larger. Even the limitless boy would have a very mysterious change. Although he still couldn't have a self, he could have a different kind of consciousness. He could constantly get closer to living beings. After organizing the infinite magical powers and magic arts in his mind into the Tao fruit scripture, Luo Fan had a clearer understanding of the levels of magic treasures. Combined with his own realm of Tao fruit Dao, he divided magic treasures into 4 levels, which corresponded to the 4 levels of earthly immortal Tao fruit, Tai Tao fruit, Daluo Tao fruit, and Hunyuan Tao fruit. The first level of magic treasure was the level when it had just become a magic treasure, which was the level of the limitless void palace at this time. Luo Fan named it the treasure of the immortal path. The next level was the Tai treasure. The next level of the Tai treasure was the Daluo heavenly treasure. The next level of the Daluo heavenly treasure was the supreme spiritual treasure. It was even more mysterious and powerful than the primordial spiritual treasure. Unfortunately, until now, what Luo Fan knew and understood was only magic treasures at the level of the treasure of the immortal path. He only knew that the primordial first dark treasures, all heaven dark treasures, and chaotic origin spirit treasures on it possessed such a level, and it was just like how he knew that his Dao fruit grand Dao fruit possessed the primordial Dao fruit, all heaven Dao fruit, and chaotic origin Dao fruit, and he was unable to imagine their might. It seems that as long as I can't obtain the Tai fruit, no matter how I refine it, it will be impossible for the limitless void palace to become a Tai treasure. Luo Fan felt helpless. The limitless void palace was the first magic treasure he had refined, and it was also the foundation of his cultivation. It could be said that it was because of the existence of the limitless void palace that he could cultivate to this level and possess such incredible power. Since he came to the untainted land, he had spent a lot of effort on it. It was even more than enough to refine 10 magic treasures. At this moment, knowing that no matter how he refined it, it would be difficult to achieve a breakthrough in the essence of the limitless void palace, Luo Fan could not help but sigh inwardly. He dispelled the idea of peeping into the mystery of the Tai Dao fruit from the breakthrough of the limitless void palace. He raised his hand and waved. An extremely powerful distortion occurred in the medium-class world that was like a palace hall. After the distortion, 99,999 kinds of yin and cold materials appeared out of thin air in the medium-class world. These materials were of different sizes. The big ones were like small mountains, and the small ones were like mustard seeds. However, so many materials were piled up in the medium-class world, but it did not seem to be crowded at all. He clearly knew that this dimensional realm wasn't large enough to hold so many materials. But these materials seemed so natural here, incomparably strange, incomparably mystical. Luo Fan had already expected this, but he did not feel the slightest bit surprised. With a thought, the dark incarnation, which had stayed in his sea of consciousness for a long time, suddenly rushed out of his sea of consciousness and arrived in the medium-class world in the blink of an eye. The dark incarnation had a dignified appearance and a slender figure. Its whole body exuded a powerful pressure, as if it controlled the power of the universe and could decide the life and death of all living things with a wave of its hand. After the dark incarnation appeared, Luo Fan raised his hand and a strange beast with a wolf head rushed out of his sleeve. It was wrapped in a clear color seal. The strange beast with a wolf head and a centipede body threw itself directly into the 99,999 kinds of materials. As the exotic beast with the head of a wolf and the body of a centipede entered the room, the materials began to undergo a strange change. It was as if a huge rod had stirred up the water in a pond, and they began to spin rapidly and orderly. The process of its rotation corresponded to some unfathomable mystery. The materials gradually dispersed and recombined, forming some inexplicable yet mysterious system from which all sorts of traces could be found. It formed an extremely mysterious system of balance with the exotic beast with the head of a wolf and the body of a centipede. After the system stabilized, Luo Fan's mind moved, and his consciousness entered the darkness incarnation. This darkness was incomparably pure and tranquil, as if it was the most gentle and tranquil place in the world. This darkness was incomparably pure and tranquil, as if it was the most gentle and tranquil place in the world. Within the range of this darkness, time and space seemed to have lost all meaning. Any living being within this darkness would have a feeling that everything in the world had nothing to do with them, and that they were the only, the most unique, and the most mysterious existence in the world. The speed at which this darkness spread was extremely fast. Before long, it had spread throughout the entire dimensional realm, completely covering the entire dimensional realm. As the darkness overlapped with the medium-class world, an indescribable feeling of control surged into Luo Fan's heart. This kind of control was different from the control of a medium-class world's master. It was a deeper level of control, as if the medium-class world was him, and he was in complete control of it. As this feeling of control appeared, Luo Fan's thoughts moved. The balance formed by the 99,999 kinds of materials and the strange beast with a wolf head and a centipede body suddenly underwent a mysterious change. In an instant, all the materials completely melted. Chapter 297. Billions of worlds, star poison evil force. After the black sphere appeared, it suddenly emitted an unimaginably high-frequency vibration. This high-frequency vibration contained the power of heaven and earth. This power was so great that it was as if the whole world was struggling and attacking. This kind of struggle and attack caused the 18 layers of hell that enveloped the entire dimensional world to shake, almost showing signs of instability. With a thought from Luo Fan, the object formed by the fusion of 99,999 materials instantly rushed out and wrapped around the black sphere, forming an even larger sphere. The 99,999 materials were so large that even after they were melted, their volume did not shrink by much. These melted materials piled up together, making the black sphere's volume increase by 100 times, reaching a diameter of over 1,000,000 feet. In front of such a huge spherical object, Luo Fan's black incarnation was as small as an ant in terms of size. However, the aura exuded by Luo Fan's dark incarnation was high and mighty, like a towering mountain or a great river. It even suppressed this huge object. This huge contrast formed a very strange and mysterious feeling, which was shocking to the hearts of the spectators. The 99,999 materials were of different colors. When these various colors fused together, they formed a very special chaotic color. This chaotic color was all-encompassing, appearing incomparably complex and mysterious. When things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. Because the chaotic color was too complicated, this sphere actually showed a special kind of purity. It made people involuntarily feel that this thing was the purest thing in the world. With a thought from Luo Fan, the 18 layers of hell that he had refined to strengthen the dark incarnation suddenly trembled, and countless changes occurred in the space-time inside. In the blink of an eye in the outside world, dozens of periods passed in the 18 layers of hell that Luo Fan had refined into a magical power. Time was the greatest force in the world. Under the effect of time, the 99,999 materials and the number 1 poison of the primordial world had completely fused into one at some point in time. They transformed into a mysterious object that was like a living thing, but it was indeed a dead object. It was mysterious and wonderful. The color of this completely fused object was grayish-black and chaotic. There seemed to be hundreds of millions of light and shadow images twisting and changing within it, as if it encompassed everything. The 99,999 materials that were compatible with the number 1 poison of the primordial world were collected by Luo Fan from the primordial world, the various continents in the endless starry sky, and the minor kiliocosms. The choice of each material was painstakingly chosen and went through many considerations. It could be said that among these 99,999 materials, every single one of them had irreplaceable effects. These materials, together with the number 1 poison of the primordial world, happened to combine into 100,000 materials. When these 100,000 materials were combined together, under the effect of a certain great Tao, they produced countless mysterious and indescribable changes. The effect was like countless ordinary materials being constructed into living beings, undergoing an unbelievable transformation. Kacha, a strange sound was transmitted into Luo Fan's mind. Hearing this strange sound, Luo Fan's mind stirred. The fusion of the 100,000 materials instantly underwent a huge change. From its original complete body, it quickly split apart. In the blink of an eye, it split into hundreds of millions of existences of different sizes. They were distributed to every inch of space in the 18 levels of hell. After these existences dispersed, they quickly distorted and emitted all kinds of mysterious and indescribable auras. It was as if they were in line with some kind of great Tao and were undergoing changes. After an unknown period of time. It seemed like only an instant had passed, but it also seemed like thousands of years had passed. The billions of existences had completely disappeared without a trace. They seemed to have merged with the void, but also seemed to have been devoured by the 18 levels of hell. They also seemed to be hidden in an unfathomable location. Luo Fan's mind stirred slightly, and countless changes occurred in the 18 levels of hell. Hundreds of millions of invisible and intangible entrances suddenly appeared in every inch of the 18 levels of hell. These entrances led to unfathomable and mysterious worlds. There were hundreds of millions of entrances here, and they led to hundreds of millions of worlds. The auras exuded from these worlds were all different, but one thing was certain, and that was that these different auras all contained a sense of extreme danger. Once you enter hell, you will be doomed eternally. Hundreds of millions of reincarnations, and immortals and gods will not be able to escape. Luo Fan recited. As he recited, an incomparably deep black light suddenly flashed through the entire 18 levels of hell. The entrances to the billions of worlds instantly disappeared without a trace. The entire 18 levels of hell regained its tranquility, comfort, and peace. It was like the origin of all things in the world, like the ultimate destination of the universe, incomparably stable and incomparably safe. With a slight thought, the 18 levels of hell disappeared without a trace, completely integrated into the Dark Incarnation's body. After the Dark Incarnation returned to the 18 levels of hell, he took a step forward and disappeared from the medium dimension. Instead, he entered the minor kiliocosm. The place where he appeared was not the central continent of the minor kiliocosm, but the depths of the starry sky, where countless star beasts were. This location happened to be the battlefield of two groups of star beasts. In the void, there were millions of star beasts that seemed to have no end, fighting with no regard for their own lives. Every moment, star beasts would be torn into pieces, and every moment, star beasts would be devoured by other star beasts. Every moment, star beasts would grow stronger after devouring other star beasts. Luo Fan's Dark Incarnation appeared here. With a shake of his body, he released a vast and boundless aura that filled the world, directly covering the millions of giant star beasts that were fighting. Among these millions of star beasts, even the weakest one had a cultivation equivalent to the core formation realm of the core formation incantation. The strongest one had even reached the crossing disaster realm, and was only one step away from breaking through its essence and transforming into a human form, achieving a cultivation equivalent to that of an innate god. If such a powerful force wasn't in the minor kiliocosm, it would be a bit of a threat to Luo Fan. After being shrouded by Luo Fan's arrogant aura, the millions of star beasts in the entire starry sky suddenly froze. Then, each of them extended their perception, their gaze, and their sense of touch towards Luo Fan. At this time, Luo Fan, who had come to the depths of the starry sky, was the dark incarnation, not the original body that had been engraved in the sole origin of these star beasts. Therefore, these star beasts didn't have any special respect for Luo Fan. Being provoked in such a way, they all let out crazy and furious roars. Then, they turned around and rushed towards Luo Fan from all directions. After such a long period of development, these star beasts had already derived many of the various things that Luo Fan had taught them at the beginning, and turned them into their innate abilities. At this time, there were hundreds of millions of lights that contained incredible power shooting towards Luo Fan from all directions. Luo Fan smiled slightly. With a thought, he raised his hand and waved. The 18 levels of hell that he had just cultivated and changed flashed past. The millions of star beasts that were rushing towards him and using all kinds of incredible supernatural powers disappeared without a trace in an instant. The entire starry sky became extremely bright and clean, as if there had been no signs of life since ancient times. It's really powerful. I didn't come here in vain. A hint of joy appeared on Luo Fan's face. At that moment, he directly gathered the millions of star beasts that were enough to cause an impact to his original body and put them into the 18 levels of hell. Then, he threw them into the hundreds of millions of world passages that he had just opened. At this moment, the millions of star beasts had been separated and thrown into one of the world passages. These star beasts were an extremely powerful force when gathered together, but when they were separated, they were just like ordinary ants. Compared to the hundreds of millions of world passages, the millions of star beasts were like a hare to 9 bulls. When thrown into the world, they were completely devoured without making a splash. The passages that Luo Fan opened when he merged the prehistoric worlds number 1 poison and 99,999 other materials into the 18 levels of hell were real-world passages. Every passageway led to a real world. However, these real worlds were not complete worlds. Instead, they only had embryonic forms. They were extremely unstable and fragile, and could be destroyed at any time. However, they could also be reborn at any time. In other words, it was a world that was constantly being born and destroyed. A world that was constantly displaying the mighty power of the world's birth and destruction. Each of these worlds was a firm space attached to the prehistoric world. They were maintained by the vast poisonous power emitted by the prehistoric world's number 1 poison. After throwing the star beasts into them, due to the stimulation of external life, these worlds would naturally be born and destroyed. He directly used the chaotic power of the world's birth and destruction to attack, space attack, and time attack to completely destroy these star beasts. The entire process did not consume any of Luo Fan's power, nor did he need to control it with his mind. The birth and destruction of these worlds were a mighty force. Ordinary cultivators in the crossing disaster realm, no matter how far away they were from attaining Tao, would not be able to escape from the mighty force of the world's birth and destruction as long as they had not attained Tao. Just the natural changes of this magical power were enough to destroy them. Even for cultivators who had attained Tao, if Luo Fan's mind was attached to this world, it would be difficult for them to escape from the mighty force of the world's birth and destruction. It could be said that with this magical power, Luo Fan already had the ability to kill cannon fodder on a large scale. Numbers could no longer affect him. Even if he were to face hundreds of millions of Mahasvara demons at the same time, he could still easily wipe them out. It's a pity that this magical power consumes too much power. Every time I use it, it consumes 1% of the prehistoric world's origin, and I still need a large amount of Yuan Qi and Essence Qi to replenish the consumption. Luo Fan waited for a moment, and such thoughts flashed through his mind. With a thought, His body had already left the mini-kiliocosm and arrived in front of his real body. At this time, Luo Fan's real body was sitting cross-legged in the mini-kiliocosm. When the dark incarnation arrived, he opened his eyes and nodded to the dark incarnation. The Wuji Palace suddenly shook, and instantly left the top of Buzhou Mountain and rushed up. In the blink of an eye, it had already broken through the endless starry sky and the prehistoric world, and rushed straight into the endless starry sky. Although there were countless stars in the endless starry sky, there were also many continents. These continents were distributed in the depths of the endless starry sky, revolving around the prehistoric world according to some incredible and mysterious rules. Because they did not emit light, and because they were very far away from the prehistoric world, in the prehistoric world, only cultivators with extremely high cultivation, extremely strong eyesight, and extremely terrifying sensing ability could detect their existence. Obviously, Luo Fan was such a person. The stars in the prehistoric world are too big, too strong, and also too compatible with the great Tao of the prehistoric world. It is impossible to devour them and use them as the support for the dark incarnation. However, these continents are quite mysterious. They are naturally condensed by the infinite power of the stars, so they should be able to be devoured. Luo Fan thought. With a thought, the Wuji Palace turned into a yellow beam of light, flying in the endless starry sky at a speed that was hundreds of times faster than Luo Fan's flying speed. In the void, it left a shadow that was more than 10,000 miles long. This shadow was so dazzling, so long that it could even be seen in the prehistoric world. After dozens of breaths, this long beam of light had crossed an unknown distance, and arrived on a continent condensed by the infinite power of the star poison. This continent had a circumference of 30 million miles. The continent was surrounded by a circle of black smoke. Even if the continent could emit light, it would be difficult to break through the cover of the smoke. Moreover, this continent was condensed by the star poison, which naturally repelled all light, and could not reflect any light. In this pitch-black, boundless starry sky that was filled with countless twinkling stars, it seemed even more inconspicuous and almost impossible to detect. If Luo Fan's perception was not so strong that he could use the star poison to sense its existence, he might have let go of this suitable continent. Arriving on this continent, the limitless void palace rotated, and from the original earthy yellow rainbow, it once again condensed into a square palace that was 10 feet long. It floated in the void, motionless and stable like a mountain. Although it was extremely small, compared to the entire continent, it seemed to have the power to suppress the void. When the Wuji Palace stopped, Luo Fan's dark incarnation smiled and nodded. His body shook and disappeared from the medium thousand world, arriving outside the Wuji Palace. There were endless stars in the endless starry sky. Of course, any type of star power could be found here. The location of this continent was extremely mysterious. It was an incredible node in the endless starry sky. This node could automatically attract the starlight emitted by the endless stars in the sky, continuously gathering the star poison, and continuously condensing it at this node. After a long time of condensation and compression of the power of the endless starry sky, it finally formed such a vast continent. The star poison contained in this continent was similar in nature to the poison emitted by the untainted land. Although it was not as pure as the poison, it was strong in quantity. After being condensed and converted in a special way, it could become the source of power of the untainted land, constantly replenishing its power. The dark incarnation raised his hand and waved. An invisible force appeared out of nowhere. The smoke that enveloped this continent seemed to be stirred by a giant hand. It suddenly surged, and gradually, a huge hole appeared under the dark incarnation. Through this hole, the scene on the continent could be seen directly. The star poison, by nature, repelled all light. Therefore, this continent was even darker than the void of the endless starry sky, and was only slightly inferior to the 18 levels of hell. But this was not a problem for the Dark Incarnation. The Dark Incarnation was originally condensed by the infinite dark power of the 18 levels of Hell. Seeing through darkness was the simplest and most basic ability. The moment this hole appeared, the scene on this continent was completely imprinted in the Dark Incarnation's eyes. There are living creatures here? After seeing the scene on this continent, Luo Fan slightly frowned. This continent seemed to be dead, but there were countless lives hidden in it. With Luo Fan's eyesight, he had just seen through the surface of this continent and discovered the countless living creatures hidden in it. These living creatures were formed by combining some kind of star power with some special star poison, which contained strong vitality, on this continent. Although they looked strange, some were as big as mountains, and some were as small as mustard seeds. They were essentially the same kind of living creatures. They could be called poisonous beasts. These living creatures lived on poison and grew up eating poison. They liked to bathe in evil, and they comprehended by observing the stars. They had actually formed a moderately large race. Looking at their behavior, although they did not seem to have much intelligence, they were not muddle-headed low-level living creatures that did not know life and death. The entire continent was densely packed with such living creatures, and there were probably hundreds of millions of them. It would be a pity if such living creatures were destroyed just like this. The Dark Incarnation frowned and muttered to himself. After a long time, he made up his mind. He raised his hand and waved. Countless amounts of star power quickly gathered towards his hands. Although this Dark Incarnation was only an incarnation and not Luo Fan's real body, it was Luo Fan's consciousness that was controlling this incarnation. Luo Fan's cultivation realm was naturally the cultivation realm of this Dark Incarnation, and Luo Fan's memories were also the Dark Incarnation's memories. The Dark Incarnation naturally possessed the ability to gather the star power and use the divine ability. The amount of star power gathered was huge, and the speed was also extremely fast. Gradually, it formed a star power vortex with a diameter of hundreds of miles around the Dark Incarnation. This star power vortex was overflowing with colorful lights, and it flickered with incomparably gorgeous light. The star power that the Dark Incarnation had gathered was too much. Chapter 298. Gradually, a colorless and transparent strange existence slowly took shape in the vortex of star power. When the colorless and transparent strange existence took shape, it seemed to open up an unimaginably huge space. Suddenly, an extremely powerful suction was produced from where the strange existence was. In an instant, the incomparably huge amount of star power above the entire continent was sucked dry. It even formed a vacuum of star power. After a long time, the star power was replenished, creating wave-like ripples. As the star power surged in, the strange existence seemed to have taken a tonic. It suddenly expanded thousands of times. It went from the size of a thumb to a radius of 30 meters. The Dark Incarnation's expression was calm. He lifted his hand and pointed. This strange existence suddenly expanded. From its original radius of 100 feet, it instantly expanded to a radius of 15 million miles. From above, it completely covered the entire continent in the void. It was so tight that not a single trace of it could be missed. "Seal," the Dark Incarnation said as he lightly tapped the ground. As he said this, the strange existence that had expanded to a radius of 15 million kilometers suddenly sank, then shrank and shrank again, completely engulfing the entire continent with a radius of 15 million kilometers. It was as if the huge continent with a circumference of 15 million miles had never appeared, disappearing into the endless starry sky. Only that strange existence remained, enveloping the original location of the continent. The Dark Incarnation seemed to be struggling. The muscles on his face trembled slightly. He opened his right hand with great difficulty. After he spread out his right hand, the strange existence that was 30 million miles in radius slowly shrank. After 7 days, it shrank to the size of a palm and floated up. In the end, it was like a colorless and transparent disk that contained some unimaginable existence. It lay quietly on the dark incarnation's right hand. This strange existence was formed by pure star power. Due to the existence of this star power, an incomparably huge alternate dimension was opened up. This alternate dimension was empty. There was no yuan qi, nor was there the existence of any substance. Compared to a chiliocosm or a chiliocosm, such a space was countless times simpler. It was also countless times more fragile. As a result, it was naturally countless times easier to create than a chiliocosm. It was so simple that even the darkness incarnation could easily create it. The interior of this void was quite large, with a radius of 25 million kilometers. After accommodating this 15 million kilometer continent, there was still an extremely vast space. These creatures devour the star poison baleful energy to grow. If they stay on that continent, they will definitely consume the star poison baleful energy of this continent. Although it's very little, it's still an unnecessary consumption. I can't leave them there. A thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. Subsequently, he raised his hand and pointed. The void was suddenly split into two, and the middle was separated by some invisible yet incomparably solid barrier. That continent occupied a portion of the continent with a radius of 15 million kilometers, while the remaining 20 million kilometers were occupied by the countless living beings on the continent. These creatures were different from ordinary creatures in terms of fragility. After completely losing the familiar living environment, they did not die because of this. Instead, they fell into a deep sleep. After being separated by Luo Fan, the densely packed decorations in the void seemed to have added some decorations to the incomparably empty void. As expected, Luo Fan breathed a sigh of relief when he saw these creatures fall into a deep sleep. Although he did not attach too much importance to the lives of these creatures, his mind would still be a little shaken if this caused the destruction of billions of creatures. This situation was naturally for the best. With a thought, Luo Fan directly sent this strange existence that encompassed 50 million kilometers of the void. At the same time, he released the 18 layers of hell and immediately withdrew it. In the blink of an eye, he had completely absorbed this strange existence and sent it to some mysterious depths of the 18 layers of hell. As the strange existence rushed in, the depths of the mysterious place suddenly trembled, and a powerful fusion force was born. It directly passed through the barrier of the strange existence and rushed into the void inside, connecting with the continent that was 30 million kilometers in circumference. After the two were connected, a feeling of fullness appeared in Luo Fan's mind. In an instant, he understood that the energy source of the 18 layers of hell and the countless unstable worlds was now guaranteed. Although the power of the continent itself was limited, compared to the primordial world's number 1 poison, it was tens of millions of times more powerful. Compared to the primordial world's number 1 poison as a source of power, with the addition of this continent, the ability to create billions of worlds naturally did not have to worry about being unable to continue. The moment the continent with a radius of 15 million kilometers disappeared into the endless starry sky, the entire endless starry sky seemed to have a strange reaction. In the blink of an eye, countless amounts of star poison evil spirits gathered from various parts of the void in the endless starry sky. Under the effect of some special power, they continuously condensed on the original location of the continent below the dark incarnation. The speed at which the star poison evil spirits condensed was neither fast nor slow, but to the dark incarnation's observation ability, it was extremely obvious. He could almost feel that the continent below was slowly forming at every moment. It's actually so mysterious. Luo Fan could not help but sigh. Although the star poison evil spirits had only just begun to condense, and the existence it condensed did not even have the embryonic form of a continent, it contained the mysteries of the endless starry sky's countless stars. If Luo Fan was willing, he could spend tens of thousands of years observing the formation of this continent. He might be able to comprehend the principles of the countless stars in the endless starry sky's countless stars, and then comprehend the mysteries of the endless starry sky's structure. Unfortunately, what Luo Fan lacked the most at the moment was time in the primordial world. After weighing the pros and cons, Luo Fan let out a long sigh. He decided to come here to comprehend the mysteries of the endless starry sky after the primordial world calamity was over. Thinking of this, he had already put this matter behind him. With a shake of his body, he re-entered the void Wuji Palace and returned to the sea of consciousness of his original body. After the dark incarnation returned, Luo Fan's original body opened his eyes. With a thought, the void Wuji Palace had already turned into a khaki-colored rainbow. With a dash, it left an afterimage that was thousands of miles long in the endless starry sky, shooting straight towards the primordial world somewhere deep in the endless starry sky. After a short while, it had already broken through a mysterious barrier and rushed into the primordial world. It appeared above the liquefied chaotic primordial chi at the top of Buzhou Mountain. Arriving there, Luo Fan's mind moved. The khaki-colored rainbow condensed and transformed into the void Wuji Palace again. It sank into the liquefied chaotic primordial chi that was already quite large. With a turn of his body, Luo Fan had already come out of the void Wuji Palace and arrived at the top of Buzhou Mountain. Floating above the liquefied chaotic primordial chi, overlooking the vast and magnificent primordial world, Luo Fan gradually had an inexplicable sense of heroism in his heart. Such a vast world is now my hometown. If I can't even protect my hometown, all other goals are just illusory. How can I talk about transcendence? How can I talk about being strong? Suddenly, there was a strange telepathy transmitted to Luo Fan's mind through some mysterious and incredible connection. Benefactor, help, this was the thought transmitted by this telepathy. Sensing this thought, Luo Fan could not help but be shocked. The moment he read this thought, he knew that this telepathy came from the god of Buzhou Mountain, and he had already sent the god of Buzhou Mountain to look for innate gods all over the primordial world. He wanted to lead the innate gods to Buzhou Mountain to cultivate in the space-time illusion that could accelerate the flow of time by 10 times. Now that there was such a telepathy asking for help, it must have encountered something difficult to solve, even endangering its life. Otherwise, it would not do this. With this judgment, Luo Fan stretched out his right hand and began to pinch. The earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body suddenly collapsed and turned into a magic power that circulated in his meridians in a mysterious and inexplicable path. At the same time, there was a complicated and inexplicable mantra flowing in his mind. With these two movements, there were countless lights and shadows flashing in his mind. It turns out that I've already gone 19 trillion miles away. This is quite difficult. Using the telepathy transmitted by the god of Buzhou Mountain as a guide, the difficulty of calculating was reduced by 1,000 times. In such a short time, Luo Fan had already calculated the location of the god of Buzhou Mountain and the general situation he was in. I can only hold on for 3 days. This is really dangerous, Luo Fan thought to himself. Traveling 19 trillion miles in 3 days was a great challenge for Luo Fan at this time. His fastest magic power to travel was to use the illusory world as a transit to cross space. In that way, he could travel tens of billions of miles in an instant. However, using this magic power to travel consumed too much of his mind. It could be predicted that even if he used the illusory world as a transit to travel 19 trillion miles, it would still consume the magic power and mental energy that he had accumulated for tens of thousands of years. In that case, even if he rushed over in time, he would only be sending himself to die. He would only have one more person to die, and he would not be able to fully use his combat power. Therefore, it was impossible for Luo Fan to choose this method at all. With a thought, he sat with his legs crossed. The Tao Fruit Tao scripture flashed quickly in his mind. This scripture was all-encompassing. There were countless magic powers and incantations in it. Not only did it include all aspects of the Dao Fruit Dao, but it also included all the cultivation paths in the world. Luo Fan had spent tens of thousands of years organizing this scripture. No one in the primordial world could compare to him in terms of familiarity with this scripture. At that moment, he took a quick look and found 365 magic powers that could increase his speed. Of course, the fastest of these magic powers could not travel 19 trillion miles in 3 days. These 365 divine abilities covered all aspects, and each divine ability was based on a completely different principle. They were all speeding up from a different point of view. 365 divine abilities meant 365 different perspectives. This also made it possible for the 365 magic powers to be combined. This magic power can speed up by 1 time, this magic power can speed up by 10 times, this magic power can speed up by 31 times. Luo Fan's thoughts were as fast as lightning, and spiritual light kept flashing in his mind. He compared them with his own speed. Soon, he confirmed that the fusion of 180 magic powers could increase his speed to the extent that he could travel 20 trillion miles in 3 days. Moreover, the most important thing was that after these magic powers were fused, they consumed pure power. This allowed Luo Fan to have the possibility of using trick. It allowed him to use external forces to activate these magic powers without expending his mental energy. It allowed him to have enough power to fight the incoming battle even if he sensed that location. Luo Fan closed his eyes, and countless spiritual lights suddenly flashed in his mind. He had sorted out the magic powers in the Dao Fruit Dao scripture, and he had an extremely deep understanding of each magic power. At that moment, it was not difficult for him to fuse and recombine these magic powers again. 2 hours passed. Luo Fan suddenly opened his eyes, raised his hand, and gently waved in the void. Incomparably mysterious trajectories that seemed to contain the endless mysteries of the world flashed out of his hand. Then, endless liquefied chaotic yuan qi continuously gathered towards his hands, and in the blink of an eye, a huge liquefied chaotic yuan qi vortex was formed on the top of Buzhou Mountain. Too slow, Luo Fan frowned. With a thought, the Wuji Void Palace rushed out from the depths of the liquefied chaotic yuan qi, and in the blink of an eye, it was already 3 feet above Luo Fan's head. After the Wuji Void Palace appeared, the vortex formed by the liquefied chaotic yuan qi instantly rose, and from the original center of Luo Fan's hands, it became the center of the Wuji Void Palace. Moreover, this vortex had increased by a full 10,000 times. It was like a huge tornado, constantly sucking in the endless liquefied chaotic yuan qi on the top of Buzhou Mountain. The Wuji Void Palace had a medium-sized world, and a small kiliacosm. At this moment, the power of absorbing the yuan qi of the 2 worlds was far from what Luo Fan could compare with. Just the yuan qi absorbed in an instant was equivalent to Luo Fan absorbing with all his might for a year. Hundreds of thousands of seconds were equivalent to Luo Fan absorbing with all his might for hundreds of thousands of years. As the vortex disappeared, the thing in Luo Fan's hands was revealed. It was an incomparably mysterious and complicated 3-dimensional talisman. This 3-dimensional talisman was the size of a basketball, and it was formed by the condensation of dense energy threads that were tens of thousands of times smaller than spider silk. These energy threads were extremely small, but because there were too many of them, the 3-dimensional talisman that was the size of a basketball was like a dense diamond. Not even the slightest gap could be seen. The countless energy threads were like countless fine and dense veined patterns. The instant the 3-dimensional talisman was formed, a grayish-black beam of light descended from the sky from the Wuji Palace and struck the 3-dimensional talisman. It was as if the talisman had entered the void and was absorbed into the talisman without leaving a single drop behind. This grayish-black beam of light was extremely condensed, and had even turned into a solid form of chaotic yuan qi. There was so much of it that even Luo Fan could not completely absorb it. However, when such a huge amount of chaotic yuan qi rushed into the three-dimensional talisman, it did not cause any changes at all. The three-dimensional talisman was like a black hole. No matter how much chaotic yuan qi there was, it was sucked in, and not a single bit was spared. After absorbing a huge amount of chaotic yuan qi, the three-dimensional talisman did not change much. It was just that its diamond-like body, which was covered with lines, became more crystal clear. The process of the energy flowing into it lasted for 2 hours. During this period of time, there were at least hundreds of thousands of instants, and the power that poured into it was equivalent to all the primal chaos origin energy that Luo Fan had absorbed for hundreds of thousands of years. In other words, 60 instants were not more than 1 second. A flick of the finger was equivalent to 60 instants. 2 hours was 7,200 seconds, which was millions of instants. And instants were even shorter than instants. At this moment, the Wuji Void Palace rotated, and the incomparably powerful suction force instantly disappeared. The grayish-brown beam of light that descended from the sky also disappeared at the same time. Then, the Wuji Void Palace sank into the depths of the liquefied chaotic yuan qi, and slowly refined itself again. At this moment, the three-dimensional talisman seemed to finally be full of energy, and began to undergo mysterious changes. There seemed to be a huge nebula inside the three-dimensional talisman, and a huge world was slowly rotating. A feeling that this thing was not in this world kept surging into Luo Fan's mind. From now on, you will be my mount. I will give you the name Nebula. Luo Fan pointed at the three-dimensional talisman in front of him and said softly. With this shout, a young voice came from the three-dimensional talisman. Thank you, Master, for giving me the name. This three-dimensional talisman had actually developed intelligence. This was also natural. At this moment, the three-dimensional talisman was extremely unique. Its source was the fusion of the 180 kinds of magical powers that Luo Fan had created. These 180 kinds of magical powers contained endless mysteries of the untainted world, and had already met the conditions to develop intelligence. After that, it even absorbed the chaotic yuan qi that even Luo Fan needed hundreds of thousands of years to gather. Such a huge amount of chaotic yuan qi was more than enough to open up a medium-sized world. It could even be said to be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut for an existence that already had intelligence. Of course, this intelligence was, after all, born, and was fundamentally different from the natural spiritual consciousness. Chapter 299. After being named by Luo Fan, the extremely complicated three-dimensional talisman, which was like a huge diamond, gradually changed. Its body was constantly expanding, and its aura was constantly rising. After a while, it had turned into a 5-clawed divine dragon that was hundreds of meters long. After the 5-clawed divine dragon was formed, there was a mysterious invisible cloud in the void that directly gathered and wrapped around the 5-clawed divine dragon's body, adding some mysterious and elegant power to the divine dragon. The divine dragon suddenly let out a dragon roar that was like thunder and lightning from the 9th heaven. It swam around with its claws and fangs. After its whole body circled a dozen times in the void, it put its head in front of Luo Fan. "Master, please have a seat." A tender voice came from the dragon's mouth and passed into Luo Fan's ears. It was the voice from the three-dimensional talisman. Hearing the voice, Luo Fan smiled slightly. He lifted his foot and took a step forward. His body had crossed a distance of dozens of meters and arrived on the dragon's head. He sat cross-legged between the two dragon horns. After sitting down, he moved his mind. At the foot of Buzhou Mountain, the square seal that was originally integrated with the doppelganger magic device at the entrance of space-time illusion suddenly shook and left the doppelganger magic device. With another turn, it turned into a long rainbow and rushed up. In a short while, it had rushed over 100,000 miles and landed in Luo Fan's hand. After putting away the square seal, Luo Fan patted the head of the five-clawed divine dragon. As he patted, the nebula let out a long roar. Its body twisted and disappeared from the top of Buzhou Mountain in a flash. At the same time, it reappeared in the void that was 100 million miles away from Buzhou Mountain. During the whole process, Luo Fan did not even feel any abnormality. There was no change in the space, and there was no strong wind caused by the excessive speed. He just turned his eyes slightly, and the environment around the nebula had changed greatly. It was as if time and space had changed naturally. This speed was more than 10 times faster than when he controlled the limitless palace. It's really not bad. It seems that with this mount, I won't have to work so hard in the future. A hint of joy flashed through Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, the five-clawed divine dragon disappeared instantly. It was Luo Fan who had activated the nebula and was rushing toward the place where the god of Buzhou Mountain had sent out the distress signal at his fastest speed. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. On this day, in a location that was 19.3 trillion kilometers away from Mount Buzhou, a mysterious light flashed, following which, a five-clawed divine dragon that was over 1,000 feet long appeared in the air tens of thousands of kilometers above the ground. It was enshrouded in clouds and mist, and its head and tail were nowhere to be seen. This was precisely a nebula advancing at extreme speed. It had only taken him 2 days to travel a distance of 19.3 trillion kilometers. However, the nebula had undergone a massive change compared to 2 days ago. At the moment, the nebula looked extremely empty. Although it could not be said to be an empty shell, it did not have much power left. It seemed to be quite strenuous for it to float in the air. Looking at its swaying appearance, it seemed that it could fall at any time. Luo Fan sat cross-legged between the two horns of the dragon's head, sensing the consumption of the nebula's power. He sighed and floated up slowly. He raised his hand and retracted it. The five-clawed divine dragon turned and turned back into a basketball-sized three-dimensional talisman, which he put into the world in his sleeve. This three-dimensional talisman was much weaker than it was 2 days ago, and it was not as crystal clear as before. Looking around, Luo Fan frowned slightly. This place was 19.3 trillion miles away from Buzhou Mountain, which was equivalent to the depths of the untainted land. The environment here was very different from the surroundings of Buzhou Mountain. The chaotic qi in this world was 10 times thinner than the chaotic qi in the surroundings of Buzhou Mountain. At the moment, it was filled with incomparably rich innate qi. At the moment, Luo Fan was in a forest formed by countless towering trees. This forest had a perimeter of 80,000 kilometers, and it was boundless and lush. Plumes of rich innate wood energy were constantly emanating from the forest, completely enveloping the area of 100,000 miles around the forest, forming a very strange domain of innate wood energy. With a thought, golden and silver gleams flickered in Luo Fan's eyes. In the blink of an eye, he had already scanned the entire forest. After that, he was slightly shocked. This forest, which covered an area of 80,000 miles, actually had the same origin. In other words, although this forest seemed to be vast and boundless, it was actually the product of the growth of a strange tree. The incomparably rich innate wood energy was condensed and transformed from the inexhaustible innate qi in the void by this strange tree. Although he had already seen the true appearance of this forest through those strange eyes, Luo Fan was still quite vigilant. This was because even with his great sun-golden eyes and bright moon-silver eyes, he could not see the specific location of the strange tree. The strange tree seemed to be the entire forest, yet it also seemed to have nothing to do with the forest. It was hidden in an invisible void, as if it was in some mysterious and indescribable space and time. This strange tree must have developed a spiritual consciousness, or even cultivated a supreme divine ability. Such a thought flashed in Luo Fan's mind. He raised his hand and made a few hand seals. He had already divined that the god of Buzhou Mountain was in this vast forest. He knew that he had not come to the wrong place. With a thought, Luo Fan floated in the void and said, "I am Luo Fan. May I ask if fellow Taoist has seen one of my companions come here?" His voice was faint and did not seem to be very loud, but it easily spread through the forest of 80,000 miles, so that everyone in the forest could clearly hear his voice. After a while, the whole forest changed slightly. The inexhaustible innate E-wood energy emitted from the forest slowly condensed and formed a phantom of a white-bearded old man's face above the forest, facing Luo Fan. "Ha ha! I didn't expect to meet two people in a row in a few days after not meeting anyone for hundreds of thousands of years. This is really a blessing from the heavens." The white-bearded old man laughed and said, "I am Tanmu, and I call myself Taoist Tanmu. I should have seen the companion that fellow Taoist mentioned. Please come in and talk in detail." When Luo Fan saw the phantom of the white-bearded old man, he knew that the old man was an innate god. Moreover, his cultivation realm was extremely high, and he had even reached the realm of true immortals. This untainted world is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. I can't believe I met another innate god in the realm of true immortals. This is really worth celebrating. Such thoughts flashed through Luo Fan's mind. However, he could even be sure that this innate god had evil intentions. This was because his divination told him that the god of Buzhou Mountain was still in danger and was still below. However, this innate god acted as if nothing had happened and even wanted to lead him into the forest. It seemed that he had other plans. "Oh, it's you, Taoist Tanmu. But why did you trap my companion?" Luo Fan said with a faint smile. "Trap? Why do you say that, Taoist Luo Fan?" The white-bearded old man looked slightly confused, as if he did not know what Luo Fan was talking about. "You and I are both sensible people. Why do you have to act like this?" Luo Fan shook his head and sighed. "Ha ha! So you really are the great medium that person mentioned. It seems that I was right to keep that person alive." The white-bearded old man laughed and said. As he spoke, the endless innate E-wood chi moved slightly, and the forest with a circumference of 80,000 miles shook slightly like waves in the sea. There was a mysterious change. An extremely dangerous breath came out of it and rushed toward Luo Fan, who was floating in the void. The expression on Luo Fan's face did not change at all. This aura might be a very powerful aura for an ordinary person who had achieved the Tao, that is, an innate god who had just become an individual immortal and could affect their Taoist heart. But for Luo Fan it was not enough. He did not even need to use his mind to expel this aura. "You have some skills. It seems that you are qualified to break into my E-wood myriad tribulations formation. If you want to save someone, break into my formation." The white-bearded old man looked at Luo Fan with a strange expression on his face. From the beginning, the old man had spoken the same language as Luo Fan. From the pronunciation and the way he spoke, it was the language created by Pangu. At this time, when Luo Fan heard the old man mention the E-wood myriad tribulations formation, he knew that this Taoist Tanmu must also be an innate god who had obtained countless benefits from Pangu's original spirit. In this way, the difficulty of dealing with this old man had increased by dozens of times. "Let me try it out first." A thought flashed in Luo Fan's mind. He raised his hand and pointed. The sun hanging high in the sky suddenly shone brightly. An extremely strange suction force appeared out of thin air. With this suction force, the sunlight within a circumference of 10 million miles seemed to be gathered by an invisible hand, constantly gathering toward where Luo Fan was. Not long after, a cloud of true sun fire condensed under his body, about an acre in size. This sun-real fire cloud was formed by compressing the pure sun-real fire. It was extremely young and unyielding, and its temperature was raised to an unbelievable level, even several times higher than the surface of the sun. It condensed under Luo Fan's body. Even though it was formed by Luo Fan Luo Fan had no choice but to use his magic power to isolate the temperature it emitted. He raised his hand and pointed. A three-dimensional talisman rushed out of Luo Fan's hand and directly into the fire cloud. This three-dimensional talisman was mysterious and complicated. It was a kind of three-dimensional talisman he had comprehended on the surface of the sun, and it contained a very obscure vitality. After the three-dimensional talisman rushed in, the fire cloud turned and shrank, turning into a 3-foot-tall golden crow. This golden crow was surrounded by sun-real fire that looked like ribbons, trembling slightly as it waved. After the golden crow was formed, it raised its head and gave a loud caw. This caw was very similar to the caw of a crow, but it was filled with an extremely dense domineering and imperial aura, as if it was an emperor that ruled over the world and was giving out orders from high above. As this caw sounded, the entire forest with a circumference of 80,000 miles was suddenly enveloped in a sea of fire. What formed this sea of fire was the extremely pure, extremely young and unyielding sun-real fire. If any of these flames were to fall into a lake, they would be able to evaporate a lake with a circumference of several tens of miles. If they were to fall into a forest, they would be able to turn a forest with a circumference of several hundred miles into ashes. But now, such a large sea of sun-real fire with a circumference of 80,000 miles had no effect on this forest at all. Although the heat waves were raging down below, and although there were crackling sounds of burning, the forest was still lush and green. The branches and leaves sticking out from the sea of fire did not show any signs of being burned. The golden and silver light in Luo Fan's eyes flickered slightly. In the blink of an eye, he could see that the surface of the forest was protected by a layer of very strange power. This power was extremely mysterious, as if it contained complicated space-time. This caused the forest to seem to be below, but in fact it was in a completely different space and world from the primordial world. Although the power of the sun-real fire was strong, it did not have much damage to such a different space and world. With a single thought, the three-legged golden crow let out another loud caw. The entire sea of fire suddenly condensed into a tiny, dazzling fiery lotus that floated above the forest. The three-legged golden crow had already landed on the fire lotus. With a thought, Luo Fan took a step forward and followed behind the golden crow, charging straight into the forest below. The moment he entered the forest, a very strange feeling flashed in Luo Fan's mind. It was as if he had passed through the space-time barrier and entered another space-time. At the same time, the scene in front of him changed drastically. The forest seemed to have expanded hundreds of millions of times in an instant. Previously, he could still feel that the forest had a radius of 80,000 kilometers, but now, he realized that no matter how he felt, no matter how he deduced, he could not deduce the size of the forest. The surrounding trees suddenly increased by thousands of times. Although they were originally huge, they were only big enough for two people to wrap their arms around. Now they were like small mountains. Gia, strange laughter suddenly came from all directions. Suddenly, the huge trees around him suddenly grew hands and feet, and their bodies flickered with green light. They became living creatures. These trees were quite powerful, and each of them had the power of a cultivator who had just reached the Tao. They also merged with the entire space and the entire forest, forming an unbreakable feeling. Enjoy my wood myriad tribulations array. Every wood servant here has 1,000th of my strength, and they have merged with the entire array. No matter how many die, the array will automatically produce the same number of wood servants. Ha ha! Taoist Master Tan Mu's voice suddenly surged toward Luo Fan from all directions. The voice was erratic, and under the concealment of the array, even Luo Fan could not find the source of the voice. Luo Fan frowned. These wood servants were not a problem for him at all, but if they could be reborn infinitely, it would be a little troublesome. With a thought, the three-legged golden crow circling around him let out a loud cry and suddenly pounced, turning a wood servant in front of it into a huge torch. However, the wood servant seemed to feel nothing. It spread its two arms, which seemed to blot out the sky and cover the earth, and pounced toward Luo Fan. Endless innate wood chi condensed into some kind of sharp and tough power, bringing with it endless space-time pressure, pressing down on Luo Fan along with the two arms. Luo Fan was not moved at all. With one step, he had already arrived in midair thousands of miles above. The wood myriad tribulations array had all kinds of mysterious and unpredictable power. Ordinary innate gods who entered this array would be unable to fly, unable to leave the ground, and trapped in the endless attacks of the wood servants. Their minds and magic power would be exhausted. However, Luo Fan's cultivation realm was so high that he could even be called the first person in the untainted land. Moreover, because he had organized the Tao fruit scripture of the Way, he had an extraordinary understanding of the formation Tao. Although this array was mysterious, it was somewhat similar to the formation Tao that he had comprehended. To him, there were many flaws. Naturally, he could use these flaws to move freely in this array. This is the edge of this array. If I go up, I can break through this array. Luo Fan looked up, and such a thought flashed in his mind. This place was in the formation space created by the wood myriad tribulations array. This formation space was boundless on a flat surface, but it had a certain height in the vertical direction. This array was created by perfected immortal Sandanmu with his body and endless chaotic vital chi. Although it was mysterious, the level of power was one level lower than that of Luo Fan due to the limitation of perfected immortal Sandanmu's realm. If Luo Fan wanted to, he only needed to use Fang Tongzi to launch a powerful attack, and he could open a hole above and directly escape from the wood myriad tribulations array. How can you escape the suction force of the array? In this array, no one should be able to leave the ground except me. Perfected immortal Sandanmu was obviously paying attention to this place. Seeing that Luo Fan suddenly arrived thousands of miles high in the sky, he was slightly shocked. This array is quite mysterious, but it also has many flaws. If fellow Taoist let me out, perhaps you and I can have a good exchange of understanding in formation Tao. Luo Fan was not in a hurry to leave and smiled faintly. There's no hurry. You have countless formation Tao in your heart. This couldn't be better. When I subdue and refine you, I'll naturally obtain your memories. When that time comes, won't all the mysteries of formation Tao be mine? Perfected immortal Sandanmu was unconcerned and smiled. Luo Fan frowned. Now that things had come to this, perfected immortal Sandanmu was still so confident. It seemed that this wood myriad tribulations array was not so simple. At this moment, countless mysterious lines and symbols flashed in the sky. Following these lines and symbols, the edge of the array above Luo Fan's head suddenly disappeared. What replaced it was a space-time, another world. Moreover, there was more than one space-time. It seemed to be endlessly overlapping and overlapping. In the blink of an eye, it had increased to a level that Luo Fan could not even count. Chapter 300. Myriad Thunder Supreme. The power of a golden immortal. Luo Fan slightly furrowed his brows. He raised his hand and pointed. The three-legged golden crow, which was entangled with the wooden servant, let out a cry that contained boundless domineering and royal aura. After the cry, endless solar true fire gushed out from its body like waves, spreading in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it had set all the wooden servants surrounding it on fire. These wooden servants were quite strong, each of them had the ability to achieve the Tao, and they could merge with the entire formation and be reborn infinitely, which made them very tricky to deal with. However, the true fire of the sun naturally restrained the innate wood energy, and there was no space-time barrier in this place to block the true fire of the sun like the whole forest. Therefore, when the true fire of the sun spread out, these wooden servants resisted for a while, then turned into huge torches. Without any ability to resist, they were gradually charred, and then turned into ashes. The blazing true fire of the sun continued to spread, igniting the other wooden servants in the surroundings and spreading out from the golden crow in all directions. As time went by, the coverage of the sea of fire grew wider and wider, and the intensity of the flames grew stronger and stronger. Soon, the boundless forest formed by countless wooden servants in the formation had turned into a boundless sea of fire. Every wooden servant was wrapped in the true fire of the sun, letting out very strange howls in the sea of fire. Luo Fan rolled his eyes, raised his hand, and summoned the three-legged golden crow from below, slowly circling around him. At the moment, the golden crow seemed to have gained the upper hand, but in fact it was just a facade. This Ewood Myriad Tribulations formation must have been created by Taoist Tanmu with the help of Pengu's primordial spirit. Naturally, it could not be broken so easily. Although those wooden servants were constantly destroyed by the true fire of the sun, at the same time, an equal number of wooden servants were constantly being created. Just as Luo Fan summoned the golden crow, the sea of fire below lost its source of fire and underwent a tremendous change at an unimaginable speed. Just as the three-legged golden crow left, several big trees instantly drilled out of the ground. Then they quickly changed. Their bodies shook slightly, and in the blink of an eye, they had turned into several incomparably powerful wooden servants. The changes here were like the first domino. As the sea of fire gradually extinguished, more and more trees grew. In a short while, the entire sea of fire disappeared without a trace and was replaced by a large forest of wooden servants. Sure enough, he has already evolved the innate Ewood Chi to the extreme. If this person can join us to deal with the great tribulation of the untainted land, how good it would be! Luo Fan sighed. He took a step forward and reached the end of the formation space above him. He raised his right hand and lightly pressed it forward. A seal appeared in his hand out of thin air, and as his right hand pressed forward, it gently hit a space-time barrier that was thousands of kilometers above the ground. Kacha, an earth-shaking sound, like the first sound since the creation of the world, came from the spot where the seal and the space-time barrier came into contact. Along with this sound, countless spiderweb-like cracks appeared in the void above the seal and spread in all directions. Along with these cracks, countless mysterious and complicated lines and symbols appeared out of thin air, twining around these cracks like an omnipotent glue, producing a terrifying pulling force that pulled these cracks closer and glued them together. Luo Fan smiled slightly, and exerted a little force with his right hand. The space-time crack completely collapsed, revealing a circular hole with a diameter of 1,000 feet, surrounded by countless cracks. On the other side of this hole was a completely different world. Luo Fan took a step forward, and stepped into this circular hole without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, he had entered a completely different world, a completely different formation space. Looking around, this world was a vast and boundless ocean. The seawater in this ocean was turquoise. In addition to containing endless innate Ewood Chi, there was also a very strange kind of water element Chi. This water element Chi was very strange, as it seemed to be able to fuse with the innate Ewood Chi, causing the combination to produce some kind of mysterious and indescribable transformation, turning it into an existence with extremely powerful offensive power. The place where Luo Fan stepped into was 100 miles above this vast ocean. At this moment, countless lightning bolts suddenly appeared out of thin air above this boundless ocean. These lightning bolts intertwined with each other, rising and falling on the surface of the ocean like lightning dragons. After a while, these lightning bolts quickly gathered, and in the blink of an eye, a giant of thunder and lightning was formed under Luo Fan's feet. The giant was over 10,000 feet tall, with a fat head and big ears, and its feet were like pillars that supported the sky. It stood there proudly like a huge pyramid. The lightning giant roared towards the sky. He held a trident in his hand that was formed from the strange energy that was the combination of innate Ewood Chi and water origin energy. Lightning coiled around his body, and he emanated a monstrous aura. After the giant of thunder and lightning appeared, It raised its eyes, which were formed from countless blazing white lightning bolts, and stared at Luo Fan, who was floating above it. The eyes of the thunder and lightning flashed with endless awe-inspiring chi, filled with a boundless pressure. Under the gaze of these eyes, Luo Fan felt as if the entire world was pressing down on his head. Luo Fan smiled, not caring about this feeling at all. At this moment, all the power of the endless ocean below was gathered on the giant before him. This caused the power contained in the giant to be so strong that it had even reached the peak of the realm of true immortals. This was the complete opposite of the previous formation space, which had turned the power of the formation into endless wooden servants. Although it is quite mysterious, it is only the manifestation of the divine Ewood thunder. Luo Fan smiled. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed a finger. The square seal spun and suddenly grew thousands of times larger. It was so overwhelming that it seemed to cover the entire sky, and it pressed down on the giant of thunder and lightning below. This giant of thunder and lightning was formed from the condensation of the divine Ewood thunder, which was formed through some mysterious transformation of the connate Ewood chi. This was the most powerful aspect of the connate Ewood chi, which could destroy all external evils and destroy all space-time. I've long since realized that this treasure of yours should be an artifact with spiritual intelligence. However, this is my formation space, and all the rules are under my control. I said that all attacks are useless against me. The voice of the giant of thunder below sounded like endless thunder. This voice belonged to Taoist Sandalwood. It was obvious that Taoist Sandalwood had attached his consciousness to the body of the giant of thunder and lightning. As soon as he said this, the entire space suddenly experienced countless wonderful changes. The space that was originally hidden in the depths of space-time and the endless worlds suddenly fused and connected with the giant of thunder and lightning. Luo Fan could even sense the space with countless wooden servants that he had passed through earlier from the countless space-times that were connected to the giant of thunder and lightning. After connecting with these worlds and the formation spaces, the giant of thunder and lightning suddenly underwent a mysterious and subtle change. It was as if it had been imbued with endless protection, but it also seemed to be hidden outside of these endless worlds, and no attacks from these endless worlds could affect it at all. The divine Ewood myriad calamity formation was very mysterious, but it still had its limit. The previous battle had already let Taoist Sandalwood know how powerful Luo Fan was. Naturally, he knew that if the power of the divine Ewood myriad calamity formation was scattered, it would be difficult for it to cause any trouble to Luo Fan. Hence, he had completely condensed the power of the entire formation, hoping to use it to suppress Luo Fan. Luo Fan sighed. Unfortunately, no matter how much power you imbued with, your cultivation level has determined that the strongest you can reach is only the peak of the true immortal realm. He raised his hand and pressed down lightly. The square seal flashed and crushed 3,967 formation spaces in a row, finding the true body of the giant of thunder and lightning hidden in the countless defenses of these spaces. The giant of thunder and lightning looked horrified. "How did you find out where I was?" He spat out this thunderous roar. As he roared, he spun the trident in his hand and drew an extremely mysterious path, bringing with it the endless power of heaven and earth, all the power of the entire formation space, and even all the power of the rule of heaven and earth, heading straight for the square seal trident that was pressing down on his head. The wind and clouds changed color, and the entire array space suddenly became illusory. Luo Fan even saw through the space and saw the main body of this array space. 129,600 huge sandalwood trees that were tens of thousands of zhang tall. This was all the power of the entire formation space. After all the power of the rule of heaven and earth was gathered, the formation space became useless with the endless power. The power of the giant of thunder and lightning instantly broke through the true immortal realm and reached the mysterious golden immortal realm. As he broke through this limit, His aura suddenly increased by 1,000 times. An incomparably sacred aura, like the supreme ruler of all thunder and lightning in the primordial world, exuded from the giant of thunder and lightning. Crack, the trident and the square seal suddenly collided. Although the square seal was so huge that it seemed to cover the sky and earth, its aura was still as simple and natural as before. There was no power at all, and no energy aura was emitted. Yet, it was this natural, simple, and ordinary seal that easily crushed the trident thrown by the lightning giant that was like the ruler of all lightning in the prehistoric world. The cracking sound was like the sound of the destruction of the world. This sound alone contained infinite power, which could turn all living beings that had not reached the Tao, even connate gods with extremely high cultivation, into powder. At that moment, the collision between the trident and the square seal had entered the golden immortal realm. Luo Fan was the only cultivator at this level in the primordial world. At this moment, such a collision could be said to be the first time since the creation of the primordial world. The square seal was refined by Luo Fan, and he was also the one controlling it. Naturally, the power it released was decided by Luo Fan. At this time, Luo Fan's strength had already reached the peak of the golden immortal realm, and he had already reached the supreme realm of attaining the primordial unity Tao fruit with just a little bit of luck. How could the power that the ultimate square seal could exert under his control be compared to the thunder and lightning giant that had stepped into the golden immortal realm under the infinite force of the E-wood myriad tribulations array? Under its pressure, the trident shattered with a loud bang. As the trident shattered, the giant of thunder and lightning, who suddenly looked enlightened, as if he had suddenly obtained the Tao, crack, crack, rumble, an extremely strange and mysterious sound that seemed to contain the supreme truth of the Tao suddenly came from the entire space. Then, the countless formation spaces created by the Emu myriad tribulations formation suddenly collapsed. Countless space fragments, like sand piled up into a mountain, suddenly rushed toward Luo Fan, and instantly drowned Luo Fan. Luo Fan's mind was filled with an inexplicable comfort. He had the power of the golden immortal realm for a long time. But only now did he truly witness the power of this realm. Although the battle with the giant of thunder and lightning only lasted for a short moment, and the result was an overwhelming victory, it was this moment of battle that allowed him to comprehend countless truths of the great Tao that he thought he understood before, but in fact, he still didn't understand much. Suddenly, Luo Fan understood the reason why he still couldn't attain the primordial unity Tao fruit. It turns out that my grasp of the various realms of the earthly immortal Tao fruit is still lacking. My foundation can be said to be quite unstable. Under such circumstances, how can I go further to attain the primordial unity Tao fruit? This thought, like lightning, split open the fog that had originally shrouded his mind, and allowed him to grasp his path to break through and attain the primordial unity Tao fruit. There was no need for him to do anything. The moment the infinite space fragments created by the formation space rushed over, his dark blue robe flashed, and he had already pushed away the countless space fragments that were rushing over. After the space fragments were gone, the true appearance of the formation space was finally revealed. It was the sandalwood forest that Luo Fan had seen before. The forest that was formed by 129,600 sandalwood trees. However, at this moment, the forest had long been ruined. It was crooked, broken everywhere, and branches and leaves were flying everywhere. Except for a sandalwood tree in the center that was 10 times taller than the other sandalwood trees, not a single one of them was intact. Thank you for saving my life, benefactor. I'm really ashamed to be saved by you again. At this moment, a very ashamed voice came into Luo Fan's ears. With a thought, Luo Fan discovered that the person who spoke was the god of Buzhou Mountain. At the same time, he also discovered the location of the god of Buzhou Mountain. When he looked up, he saw the god of Buzhou Mountain struggling to get out of the heart of a sandalwood tree. These sandalwoods were obviously not ordinary sandalwoods. They contained an infinite amount of innate Ewood chi, and had been tempered by the Ewood myriad calamities formation for countless years. They were so strong that they were even harder and stronger than the strongest diamond. Even mountain god Bujo, who had attained the Tao, would not have an easy time escaping from them. Luo Fan smiled and said, "It's good that you're fine. It was nothing, so there's no need to thank me." As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved. The sandalwood that had sealed the god of Bujo Mountain collapsed with a loud bang, turning into countless wood powder, and the god of Bujo Mountain was released. "Follow me, my friend. Bring me to see what Taoist sandalwood looks like." Without waiting for the god of Bujo Mountain to thank him, Luo Fan walked directly to the tallest and largest sandalwood. "So this is the golden immortal realm. So this is the golden immortal realm. Ha ha!" At this moment, a laughter that was getting louder and louder came from somewhere. It reverberated and entered the ears of Luo Fan and the god of Bujo Mountain. The voice contained endless power. It was nothing to Luo Fan, but to the god of Bujo Mountain, who had just attained the Tao and was at most an individual immortal realm, it was too powerful. In an instant, the god of Bujo Mountain's expression froze. The divine power in his body surged and turned into an auspicious cloud that floated above his head. Hundreds of millions of auspicious lights fell from the auspicious cloud and protected him. Only then did he show a relaxed expression. Luo Fan glanced at the god of Bujo Mountain and nodded to himself. This move was not taught by him. It was comprehended by the god of Bujo Mountain himself. It could defend against Taoist sandalwood's sound attack that contained a trace of the true immortal realms concept. It was considered a rather powerful protective technique. Perhaps the reason he could last so many days in the Emu Myriad Tribulations formation was because of this protective technique. This thought only flashed in his mind for a moment. In the blink of an eye, he focused his attention on the source of the sound, which was the center of the sandalwood forest. He lifted his feet and took a light step. He seemed slow, but he was actually fast. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed several miles and arrived at the center of the forest. The sandalwood was 100,000 feet tall. When he looked up, it towered into the clouds like a pillar in the sky. I predicted that I would have a great opportunity soon, so I paid attention to everything. I didn't expect that the opportunity would come in such a way. It's really unexpected. Taoist Master Tan Mu's voice had already returned to its usual calmness. Luo Fan smiled faintly and said, "The word opportunity is extremely mysterious. How can it be easily understood? Fellow Taoist, are you going to talk to me like this?" "Sorry for my rudeness." Taoist Sandalwood laughed. As he spoke, a figure stepped out of the sandalwood that was 100,000 feet tall like a phantom and gently arrived in front of Luo Fan. It was the white-bearded old man that Luo Fan had seen at the beginning. At this time, the god of Bujo Mountain had also used his supernatural power to follow behind Luo Fan. Seeing the white-bearded old man, he was furious and said, "You're so unreasonable. I kindly told you that there will be a great calamity in the untainted land and invited you to cultivate in a place that can increase your time by 10 times. It's fine if you don't appreciate it, but why did you trap me with a formation?" Chapter 301. Great Wood Tao Verification Mantra, Spacetime Teleportation. If you want to meet my benefactor, why don't you go to Bujo Mountain personally? Although this place is billions of kilometers away from Bujo Mountain, with your ability, it will only take you 10 years. Why do you have to use this method? The god of Bujo Mountain was rather indignant and said angrily, "Haha, fellow Taoist, haven't you noticed? Although I have cultivated this ability, I have taken the wrong path previously. Now my main body is restricted here, and I can't move at all. If that's not the case, why would I resort to such a method?" The white-bearded old man laughed and said, "You can't move your main body? This seems like you can't be blamed." The god of Bujo Mountain naturally did not believe it at first. However, when he saw the white-bearded old man's calm expression, he suddenly thought of the scene at the foot of Buzhou Mountain before he transformed. He could not help but feel the same way. From the looks of it, he was gradually forgiving perfected sandalwood. So that's how it is. Luo Fan finally opened his mouth. The difference between perfected sandalwood's performance before and after was too great, and he could not help but suspect his intentions. After listening to perfected sandalwood's words, he observed carefully and indeed discovered the abnormality of perfected sandalwood. He finally believed that perfected sandalwood really could not move at all. This fellow Taoist's ability is truly earth-shattering. I, Sandalwood, have offended you just now. I hope you won't blame me. Taoist Master Sandalwood bowed and apologized to Luo Fan. It's fine. I just wonder how you took the wrong path back then? With your ability, you should be considered top-notch in the primordial world. Why can't you teleport your main body? Luo Fan smiled and said, I'm to blame for this. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, when I first developed intelligence and felt myself, I realized that there was a mysterious cultivation technique circulating in my mind. As my intelligence was very hazy at that time, I only cared about the benefits in front of me and ignored the long-term benefits in the future. Under my body, I used that technique to completely merge myself with the surrounding 5,000 kilometers, perfected sandalwood side. Become one with the surrounding 10,000 li? Looks like the technique fellow Taoist has obtained is quite profound. Even I only know a few dozen techniques that can combine one's body with heaven and earth. Luo Fan's eyes lit up as he spoke with a smile. Dozens of them. Fellow Taoist's words are truly embarrassing. Taoist Master Tan Mu said with a bitter smile. Combining one's body with the surrounding heaven and earth. This technique is indeed mysterious. Fellow Taoist, you were born with this technique. It's really a great opportunity. Although there's the disadvantage of not being able to move, it's just a small flaw in an otherwise perfect situation. It's nothing much. The god of Buzhou Mountain was very envious. As the mountain god of Buzhou Mountain, he was born with a very close relationship with Buzhou Mountain. They could be considered as one. Although this allowed him to gradually control the wider environment of Buzhou Mountain as his cultivation realm increased, it also limited him to Buzhou Mountain, restricting his spirit and body. His providence had no choice but to combine with Buzhou Mountain. Any damage to Buzhou Mountain would cause him to suffer the same damage. Although there were advantages, there were even more disadvantages. Compared to him as the god of Buzhou Mountain, Taoist Master Tan Mu's technique of combining one's body with the surrounding heaven and earth did not have the disadvantage of having one's spirit and body restricted. Moreover, he would not suffer the same damage because the heaven and earth were damaged. Comparing the two, this technique of combining an innate god with heaven and earth was much better than his fate as the god of Buzhou Mountain. Although it's just a small flaw in an otherwise perfect situation, it's precisely this flaw that forced me to go to great lengths to meet fellow Taoist Luo Fan. Taoist Master Tan Mu smiled. If fellow Taoist had said so earlier, Benefactor would definitely have come to meet fellow Taoist. Fellow Taoist, you didn't have to go to such lengths. The god of Buzhou Mountain pointed at the 129,600 sandalwood trees that had fallen and broken like ruins around him. He said helplessly, fellow Taoist, this would myriad tribulations formation wouldn't have ended up like this. Haha, fellow Taoist, you're wrong. Although the would myriad tribulations formation is the foundation of my existence, the battle with fellow Taoist Luo Fan may have destroyed the formation, but it also allowed me to witness the supreme power of the golden immortal realm. It pointed out the path to Tao for my future progress. In comparison, how can my gains be compared to a mere formation? Taoist Master Tan Mu laughed. Even Luo Fan could not help but admire his open-mindedness. The would myriad tribulations formation was so powerful that even Luo Fan, who had destroyed it with his own hands, felt a little reluctant. Taoist Master Tan Mu used this formation as the foundation of his existence, but he could not care less about it. This kind of broad-mindedness was truly amazing. I was too heavy-handed in this matter. I wonder if I can take a look at your technique? Perhaps I can find a way to move your body, Luo Fan said with a smile. If I'd known that your supernatural power was incredible, I would have asked for your help. Taoist Master Tan Mu smiled, and his eyebrows and beard trembled. At that moment, the Taoist Master Tan Mu, who appeared in front of Luo Fan and the god of Buzhou Mountain, was not his real body, but an incarnation formed by his power condensed from innate Yi-Wood Qi. This incarnation did not have much power. It could only bear Taoist Master Tan Mu's will and turn into a shadow. After the incarnation finished speaking, it raised its hand and pointed above. The huge sandalwood tree suddenly shook violently. Luo Fan was secretly surprised. Could it be that this cultivation method was so extraordinary that even the incarnation that carried Taoist Master Tan Mu's will could not condense it? Soon, the result was revealed. As the huge sandalwood tree shook, countless jade-green lights were emitted from it and quickly condensed 3 feet above the white-bearded old man's head. After a short while, hundreds of thousands of words and hundreds of pictures had condensed into a technique. After the entire technique was condensed, a strange fragrance suddenly appeared in the void. At the same time, there were all kinds of extremely mysterious sounds that seemed to contain the endless mysteries of the heaven and earth. Tao suddenly appeared everywhere in the void. They slowly surrounded the technique that was condensed from the jade-green light. Hearing the faintly discernible mysterious sounds, a trace of surprise flashed in Luo Fan's mind. Merely the condensation of these words was able to cause such a phenomenon, so this cultivation technique seemed to be extremely extraordinary. It was even to the extent that it might be comparable to the most fundamental nameless cultivation technique he cultivated, the quintessence cultivation technique of the Tao fruit Grand Tao. With this understanding, Luo Fan's eyes instantly turned gold and silver. A ray of gold light and a ray of silver light shot out of his eyes, instantly covering the technique that was floating above the white-bearded old man's head. In an instant, he saw countless mysteries that the naked eye could not see, and received countless information that the ordinary naked eye could not receive. Great Wood Tao Verification Technique. These 5 names written in the mysterious and complicated Pangu characters surged into Luo Fan's mind. Although there were only 5 large words, they seemed to contain countless complex and profound information. Even these words seemed to contain many of the profound mysteries of this cultivation technique. It's actually so mysterious. It seems that Taoist Master Tan Mu is really blessed by nature. The Pangu primordial spirit that was attached to him must be much more than the one attached to me. Such thoughts flashed in Luo Fan's mind. Of course, he was not jealous at all. The number of Pangu primordial spirits was only the number of opportunities to obtain a cultivation method. It did not mean anything. The number of Pangu primordial spirits attached to one's body did not mean that one's future achievements would be small, and the number of Pangu primordial spirits attached to one's body did not mean that one's future achievements would be great. He continued to read, and the entire Great Wood Tao verification technique had already surged into his mind in the blink of an eye. Luo Fan already had the experience of sorting out the Tao fruit scripture, so he was already very familiar with comprehending cultivation methods and making a rough evaluation of them. With a flash of inspiration in his mind, he had already understood the essence of the Great Wood Tao verification technique. This cultivation method did not cultivate Tao fruit, primordial spirit, talismans, or patterns, but a kind of true spirit that was one level deeper than the divine soul. The first step of cultivating this Great Wood Tao verification technique was to transform all one's origin of life and everything in one's body into a very strange true spirit state. After that, one would continue to cultivate and strengthen the true spirit, so that the true spirit would gradually be compatible with the Supreme Great Way. Finally, when one cultivated to the peak, the true spirit would be completely integrated into the void of heaven and earth, and one would be able to completely control the supreme great way of heaven and earth. One would know everything, and be omnipotent. The most difficult part of the entire cultivation method was the first and last step. The last step was to completely integrate one's true spirit with the Supreme Great Way and completely control the Supreme Great Way. This was like surpassing heaven and earth. One could imagine how difficult it was. The first step was to transform one's body, divine soul, and origin of life into a pure true spirit state. That was equivalent to breaking the shackles of the body and divine soul, directly releasing one's true spirit hidden in the depths of the body, divine soul, and origin of life. Although it was less difficult than surpassing heaven and earth, it was not something that ordinary creatures, or even ordinary innate gods, could do. There was a shortcut in the Great Wood Tao verification technique according to Taoist Sandanmu's wish. That was to directly integrate one's body, divine soul, and origin of life with heaven and earth within a certain range. With the help of this integration, one's true spirit could be released, breaking away from the restrictions of the body, divine soul, and origin of life. Although it would be much less powerful than the real cultivation method, it could be considered as completing the first step of the Great Wood Tao verification technique from another point of view. Taoist Sandanmu's choice was obviously the first step. The mystery of this cultivation method is far beyond my imagination. It's really a great opportunity for you to obtain this method. Luo Fan exclaimed in admiration after roughly reading the cultivation method. Although the body is good, it's just that I went the wrong way. Now it's troublesome. Taoist Sandanmu raised his hand and dispersed the words and patterns formed by the green light above. As the words and images dissipated, the strange fragrance and the sound that seemed to contain the supreme mysteries of the Grand Tao also disappeared. The god of Buzhou Mountain suddenly said, "What happened just now? I seem to have arrived at a complete void just now. There was only a small sapling that kept growing until it broke through heaven and earth and gave birth to countless worlds." Both Luo Fan and Taoist Sandanmu were shocked. Both of them used their own methods to look at the god of Buzhou Mountain. In an instant, mountain god Buzhou had a feeling that he could no longer keep his most secretive secrets from the inside out. It flowed through his mind and will. "Benefactor, fellow Taoist, why are you doing this?" Mountain god Buzhou frowned and asked. He didn't show any anger. Although the god of Buzhou Mountain had traveled billions of miles to look for innate gods in the past thousands of years and could be considered to have gained a lot of experience, his nature had not changed much. He was still the god of Buzhou Mountain, who was willing to give up his authority to control the top of Buzhou Mountain after receiving a cultivation method from Luo Fan. He was only slightly puzzled by Luo Fan and Taoist Sandanmu's actions, which were clearly offensive to him, but he did not think it was inappropriate. Luo Fan and Taoist Sandanmu were in shock. They looked at each other and shook their heads with bitter smiles. "I didn't expect the cultivation method I've been cultivating for hundreds of thousands of years to be so compatible with you. It seems like it was born for you. This is unbelievable," Taoist Sandanmu exclaimed. "You're able to enter the Tao realm created by this cultivation method just by looking at it. It seems like you're really fated with this cultivation method," Luo Fan also exclaimed. "This? What are you talking about? Why can't I understand?" the god of Buzhou Mountain said in confusion. At that moment, he also felt that the state he had just entered did not seem simple, but he could not understand what kind of state it was at all. "Since this cultivation method is fated with you, I'll pass it to you. I hope that you can succeed in your cultivation as soon as possible," Taoist Sandanmu shook his head and said. As he spoke, he did not wait for the god of Buzhou Mountain to reply. He raised his hand and pointed. A dot of dark green light rushed out of his hand and instantly crossed the distance. It went straight to the Niwan between the god of Buzhou Mountain's eyebrows and drilled into it. Mountain god Buzhou had a look of surprise on his face, but very quickly, he went into a state of confusion. His eyes revealed a look as if he was thinking about countless complicated things. With the golden eyes of the sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon, Luo Fan's eyesight almost surpassed all living beings in the untainted land. The moment Taoist Sandanmu released that dot of dark green light, he saw clearly what was contained in it. It was densely packed with mysterious patterns and words. It was the Great Wood Tao verification technique from before, and there were even many things that weren't in the Great Wood Tao verification technique. It was obvious that these were Taoist Tanmu's experiences and insights from cultivating the Great Wood Tao verification technique over the past hundreds of thousands of years. It seemed that Taoist Sandanmu was sincere in teaching the Great Wood Tao verification technique to the god of Buzhou Mountain. Fellow Taoist, you're so generous. Luo Fan praised. Fellow Taoist, you're too kind. How am I generous? What's the loss to me by teaching this technique to you? Instead, I have a friend who cultivates the same cultivation method as me that I can communicate with. Taoist Sandanmu laughed. You're generous to be able to teach your cultivation method to others. I'm not as broad-minded as you, fellow Taoist. Luo Fan smiled faintly. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to be so modest. Fellow Taoist, you wasted tens of thousands of years of cultivation time for the great tribulation of untainted land. Your great love is our role model, Taoist Sandanmu continued to say with a smile. Luo Fan could not help but shake his head. There was no point in continuing this conversation. He smiled and said, There's no need to say that. Fellow Taoist's technique is too mysterious. I can't comprehend its mystery in a short time, and I can't find a way to solve your shortcomings. I'll need to go into seclusion and carefully comprehend it before I can give you an answer. Thank you, fellow Taoist, Taoist Sandanmu said without any disappointment on his face. Luo Fan nodded. He raised his hand and waved. All of a sudden, countless innate Iwud Chi quickly gathered toward him in the void. These innate Iwud Chi were originally under Taoist Sandanmu's absolute control. However, at this moment, Taoist Sandanmu realized that he had lost control over these innate Iwud Chi. He felt that these innate Iwud Chi were suddenly carrying many mysteries of heaven and earth that he did not understand before. In an instant, he understood that this was Luo Fan deliberately showing him some kind of mystery. He quickly focused all his attention on Luo Fan's every move. Luo Fan sensed something at this moment. He smiled faintly and waved his right hand. The countless innate Iwud Chi quickly condensed into energy threads that were as thin as gossamer threads that were almost condensed to the limit. These energy threads spun rapidly in front of him, twisted and condensed. In the blink of an eye, they had already outlined extremely mysterious and complicated three-dimensional talismans. The number of these three-dimensional talismans increased. In the blink of an eye, there were as many as 129,600 of them. These 129,600 three-dimensional talismans spun rapidly, intertwined, and reorganized. In a short while, they had condensed into an extremely mysterious array formation. This is a great array formation that contains the power of time and space. Taoist Sandanmu watched the entire process and finally could not help but exclaim, "That's right." Luo Fan was not surprised that Taoist Sandanmu could see the source of this array formation. After all, the Iwud Myriad Tribulations array that Taoist Sandanmu had set up already contained the supreme mystery of the array Tao. The fact that he could set up this array formation proved that his understanding of the array Tao had reached an extremely profound level. This array formation can open up a space with a radius of 100,000 feet. The time flow in this space is 20 times faster than the primordial world. Luo Fan said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, are you willing to follow me to take a look?" "I can't ask for more," Taoist Sandanmu said happily. Luo Fan smiled and raised his hand. The array formation in front of him, which was 10 feet in diameter, opened to both sides, revealing a medium-sized door. Behind the door, an aura that was completely different from the primordial world surged out. "Please," Luo Fan said. Daoist Sandanmu could not wait to step into it. It was a spherical space with a diameter of 100,000 feet. This space was filled with a thin but endless stream of chaotic energy. After stepping into this space, Daoist Sandanmu felt as if he had entered a completely different time and space. "I didn't expect that there would really be such a wonderful way to change time. Unbelievable, unbelievable." Daoist Sandanmu could not help but exclaim as he observed the space. Chapter 302. The Art of Taking Shortcuts. Imitating Daoist Sandanmu did not stay in the space-time formation for too long. He only carefully examined the formation for a while before his figure dispersed and his consciousness returned to his body. He then began to quietly comprehend the mysteries of the way of space-time that Luo Fan had displayed when he had set up the formation. Daoist Sandanmu's real spirit had been separated from his body. His body and divine soul had merged with the surrounding world for hundreds of thousands of years, so the world within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was like the inside of his body. Luo Fan had set up the formation in this area without any disguise, so he could naturally sense the changes in the energy used in the formation and the space-time changes caused by the energy changes. Combined with his own attainments in the way of formations, it was highly possible for him to comprehend a trace of the mysteries of the way of space-time. No matter how mysterious the formation set up by others was, how could it compare to the mysteries he had comprehended himself? After Daoist Sandanmu left, Luo Fan smiled and raised his right hand. With a gentle wave, the space inside the space-time formation was instantly split into two. The god of Buzhou Mountain occupied one half of it, continuing to immerse himself in the Dao state brought about by the Great Wood Dao verification technique. On the other hand, he was sitting cross-legged in the air on the other side of the space. His mind was constantly circulating the Great Wood Dao verification technique's mantra and circulation route. The Great Wood Dao verification technique was very mysterious, and it contained many truths of heaven and earth that Luo Fan's Dao fruit did not contain. Luo Fan carefully comprehended it and felt that his horizons were gradually widened. Countless truths of Dao that he had comprehended in the past gradually merged into one under the integration of the Great Wood Dao verification technique. Unknowingly, he felt that his understanding of the Dao of heaven and earth seemed to have advanced to another level, and the supreme Dao that existed in the unseen world seemed to have taken another step closer to him. It was even to the extent that he even felt that the grand Dao fruit that was extremely indistinct and unreachable seemed to be within reach, and it seemed like he only had to exert a little more strength and take another step forward before he would be able to attain that supreme Dao fruit. The feeling that he could make a breakthrough with just one more step was just an illusion. It was an illusion that would inevitably appear after he obtained the qualification to seek the Tai Dao fruit and had a slight understanding of his cultivation realm. Luo Fan knew this better than anyone else. So, when this sort of misconception appeared in his mind, he merely sensed it slightly before tossing it to the back of his mind, and then he continued to comprehend the supreme profundities revealed by the Great Wood Dao corroboration technique. Although the feeling that he only needed one step to break through was just an illusion, the fact that it could make him feel this way also proved the mysteriousness of the Great Wood Dao verification technique and its effect on Luo Fan. How could he let it go? Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed. This 100 years was the time within the space-time formation, and it was equivalent to 5 years in the untainted world. During this period of time that was neither long nor short, Luo Fan had been carefully comprehending the mysteries of the Great Wood Dao verification technique in the formation, while the god of Buzhou Mountain was still in the Dao realm brought about by the Great Wood Dao verification technique. On this day, A very strange feeling suddenly flowed through Luo Fan's mind. This feeling came from the space-time formation, and it was precisely because the formation that could change space-time and accelerate the flow of time by 20 times had undergone an inexplicable change due to a mysterious vibration. Luo Fan carefully comprehended it, and a look of joy appeared on his face. This vibration was caused by the formation of a formation that could also change spacetime near the formation, which meant that someone was trying to change spacetime around it. After understanding this, Luo Fan naturally understood what had happened. With a thought, his body had already left the formation and arrived beside perfected Tan Mu's main body. Just as he expected, at that moment, a 3 feet wide spherical formation was slowly taking shape 1,000 feet away from Daoist Tan Mu's body. The ball-shaped formation was formed from the purest innate Yiwud Qi, and its surface was covered in countless runes and strange lines. The runes and strange lines on the surface of the formation were extremely complicated. They followed some incredible mysteries of the world and circulated and changed, as if they were pulling spacetime to undergo an incredible transformation. As it circulated, the spacetime in the formation gradually changed. I didn't expect that I would be able to comprehend some of the Tao of spacetime in just 5 years. It seems that perfected Tan Mu's aptitude is even comparable to Hong Jun's. Luo Fan exclaimed in admiration. In his opinion, the formation was still very simple and crude, and there were countless places that could be improved upon. The space that was opened up in it was extremely narrow, and the time that was distorted was only slightly faster than the time in the primordial world. However, it already meant that he had stepped onto the right track of comprehending the Tao of spacetime. In the future, he only needed to continue researching in this direction and comprehend. One day, he would be able to reach the point where he could easily set up a formation that sped up the flow of time like Luo Fan. Just as Luo Fan was thinking about that, the sound was like the sound of the entire primordial world shaking at the same time. It entered Luo Fan's ears. Then, that extremely unstable, extremely small formation suddenly collapsed. Although the formation was small, the connate Yiwud Qi contained in it was unimaginably rich. When the formation collapsed, a powerful innate Yiwud Qi burst out from the point where it collapsed. The power of the explosion was as huge as the detonation of an atomic bomb. If it was allowed to wreak havoc, everything within a radius of 50 kilometers would probably be flattened. Unfortunately, it still didn't succeed. Taoist Master Tan Mu sighed leisurely. Following this voice, a supreme force appeared out of thin air and directly brushed past the connate Yiwud Qi that had suddenly erupted. After this supreme force brushed past, the connate Yiwud Qi instantly calmed down from its originally violent state. It became like flowing water and was easily absorbed by the huge sandalwood tree. It only took you 5 years to comprehend the Tao of spacetime. This already makes me envious and amazed. You must know that in order to set up a formation that could change time, I have studied it for tens of thousands of years. Luo Fan said with a smile. Back then, you started studying from nothing, but now I have such a detailed teaching from you. How can we compare? The leisurely voice continued. After this voice, there was a fluctuation of energy, and the figure of a white-bearded old man gradually condensed in front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan shook his head and smiled bitterly. I only performed this technique in front of you once. How can I teach you in detail? You don't have to flatter me. Seeing that Taoist Master Tan Mu was about to continue speaking, Luo Fan raised his hand to stop him. You don't have to praise me anymore. Apart from sensing your breakthrough in the Tao of spacetime, I came out this time because I have something to discuss with you. Taoist Master Tan Mu bowed and said, If there's anything you need, just tell me. This matter is related to Fellow's Great Wood Tao verification technique. This technique is very mysterious. Although I spent 100 years to comprehend it, the results were very little. I only found a shortcut that has a slight effect on Fellow's current state. I wonder if fellow is willing to give it a try? Luo Fan said in a somewhat ashamed tone. A shortcut? Can you explain it to me? Taoist Master Tan Mu was pleasantly surprised. Taoist Master Tan Mu's body and spirit are now combined with this world, but your true spirit has obtained freedom. Although your body can't leave this place, your true spirit is fine. If you cultivate according to the technique I comprehended from the Great Wood Tao verification technique, you might be able to reconstruct a body. In the future, you'll be able to rely on this body to travel around, Luo Fan said. May I know what's so bad about this technique? Taoist Master Tan Mu looked hesitant. Listening to Luo Fan's words, after cultivating a technique, he would be able to move around in a different body. This sounded like a perfect solution to his current problem, but since Luo Fan said that it was only a shortcut, then it must have a great drawback. Luo Fan sighed and said, the disadvantage of this method is that the connection between fellow Taoist's body and divine soul still exists, and is still very close. If fellow Taoist leaves and this place is destroyed, then fellow Taoist will still be injured. You're wrong, Taoist Master. This is not a shortcut. This is clearly the greatest advantage of this technique. Taoist Master Tan Mu laughed. What do you mean? Luo Fan asked with a frown. Think about it, Taoist Master. I was born with my body and spirit. If I abandon them casually, I'll definitely feel uneasy in the future. How can I seek the ultimate Tao then? At this time, my body and spirit are fused with heaven and earth. Although there's a risk of them being damaged, it's also a kind of supervision. Isn't that wonderful? Taoist Master Tan Mu said with a smile. Since you think so, I won't say anything more. I'll teach you that technique now, Luo Fan said with a sigh. What Taoist Master Tan Mu said made sense. However, there was another reason that Taoist Master Tan Mu didn't mention. He was an innate god blessed by nature. His body and spirit could attract so many Pangu's primordial spirits to attach themselves to him. There must be many mysteries hidden in it. On the other hand, no matter how profound the technique Luo Fan comprehended was, no matter how inconceivable the profundities it contained, it was far from being comparable to his physical body and soul. If he abandoned his body and spirit for the body that he had condensed, it would be like throwing a watermelon to pick sesame seed. It was really unwise. Moreover, this state of merging his body with heaven and earth was also a stage of the Great Wood Tao verification technique. If he could break through in the future, his cultivation realm would be greatly improved. How could he just abandon it like that? A light flashed in Luo Fan's mind, and countless innate would chi quickly condensed. In the blink of an eye, a complicated technique consisting of tens of thousands of words and dozens of patterns was condensed in front of the white-bearded old man. Although this technique was also quite profound, it was far from the Great Wood Tao verification technique. At least, this technique had already been condensed, but there was still no strange phenomenon in the surroundings. It was completely different from when the Great Wood Tao verification technique was being used. Taoist Sandalwood looked up at this technique. As an innate god who had inherited Pangu's primordial spirit, his comprehension ability was naturally many times stronger than ordinary innate gods. As soon as he looked at this technique, he instantly incorporated it into his mind. In the blink of an eye, he had a general impression of this technique. Although there was still a long way to go before he could truly comprehend this technique, he already knew how profound it was. Taoist Brother's ability is really as incredible as Taoist Buzhou said. I can't believe you have such a strange idea to be able to comprehend such a profound technique. I, Taoist Sandalwood, am far inferior to you. Taoist Sandalwood couldn't help but praise. You flatter me. I'm afraid there will be some tribulations in cultivating this technique. Taoist Brother, you need to be careful. Luo Fan smiled. Taoist Sandalwood's eyes flashed with understanding. He bowed to Luo Fan and said, Don't worry, Sandalwood. I really can't help it when I see this technique. Forgive me for being impolite. You don't have to worry about me, Taoist brother, Luo Fan said with a smile. Forgive me, Taoist Sandalwood said again, feeling very ashamed. His body swayed and disappeared without a trace. As he disappeared, the huge sandalwood began to shake slowly. This tall and inexplicable sandalwood could be said to be Taoist Sandalwood's original body, but it was also something that appeared after his body, spirit, and heaven and earth combined. It could be said to be a strange existence that seemed right but was actually wrong. It was mysterious and wonderful beyond words. Luo Fan didn't look at how this seemingly right but actually wrong body would change. He turned around and went back into the space-time formation behind him. He sat down cross-legged again and continued to comprehend the Great Wood Tao verification technique. It wasn't easy for him to obtain such a profound technique. If he didn't comprehend it properly, Luo Fan wouldn't forgive himself. Before entering the meditative state, Luo Fan moved his mind slightly and raised his hand to wave out a mysterious and inexplicable trajectory. Along with this trajectory, the extremely mysterious space-time formation suddenly produced countless tremors. Then, the entire formation suddenly shrank violently. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk from its original diameter of 3 meters to the size of a mustard seed. Then, it swayed slightly and hid in the void, difficult to find. After the formation disappeared, Luo Fan entered a meditative state. In his mind, there was only the mnemonic chant of the Great Wood Tao verification technique, and the circulation route was constantly flashing. He had already cultivated the Tao of Fruit of Tao, so he naturally wouldn't cultivate the Tao of True Spirit represented by the Great Wood Tao verification technique. However, this technique contained many secrets that were useful for the Tao of Fruit of Tao. He planned to rebuild a body in the world of his sea of consciousness and simulate cultivating this technique. Of course, simulated cultivation seemed simple, but in fact, it required countless preparations. This was especially so when the Great Wood Tao verification technique was so profound. If he didn't make enough preparations, when the Great Wood Tao verification technique cultivated the Tao of True Spirit, it was very likely that it would turn the tables on him and eventually occupy his sea of consciousness, destroying the foundation of his Tao of Fruit of Tao. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan didn't start cultivating at this time. Instead, he carefully comprehended the mystery of this technique and carefully studied how to perfectly simulate it without any danger of conflict. After Luo Fan entered the space-time formation, the vibration of Taoist Sandalwood's seemingly real body became faster and more profound. Heaven and earth within a radius of 100,000 miles gradually underwent countless changes under this vibration. The entire world produced some kind of incredible distortion. The 129,600 sandalwood trees that had fallen and broken in this world were rapidly decomposing. Soon, they had been decomposed into countless strands of innate wood chi, which gradually sank into the void, as if they had completely fused with the void. As the sandalwood disintegrated, the land within a radius of 100,000 miles gradually changed. The undulating terrain was no longer much different from the surrounding land. The innate wood chi that had fused with the void crossed tens of thousands of miles through some unimaginable method and was channeled into the unusually tall tree in the center, which was Taoist Sandalwood's seemingly real body. It made the vibration of Taoist Sandalwood's body even more profound and powerful. In the blink of an eye, the vibration had reached 1,296,000 times. At that moment, a thunderous sound rang out, as if the world was being split open. A large hole with a circumference of 100,000 miles suddenly appeared in the layer of astral wind, thunder, and fire above 90,000 miles. Through this giant hole, endless strong wind, thunder, and fire descended from the sky, covering every inch of space and land within a radius of 100,000 miles. Among them, 9 layers of astral wind, thunder, and fire rained down on the sandalwood in the center of the area. I knew there would be a calamity, and it's just as I expected. Taoist Sandalwood's heroic voice rang out from his body. The countless astral wind, thunder, and fire that fell from the sky seemed to have undergone some mysterious transformation. Their destructive power was more than 100 times stronger than ordinary astral wind, thunder, and fire. It struck the void, shattering all the yuan qi in the void. Xiantian yuan qi, Xiantian yiwood qi, and even the wisps of extremely sparse chaos yuan qi couldn't withstand the endless astral wind, thunder, and fire, and were instantly disintegrated. Thunder Lord Yi-Wood, go! A soft cry rang out. Endless innate Yi-Wood Qi shot out from Taoist Sandalwood's body, instantly producing countless Yi-Wood thunderbolts. After the thunderbolts were formed, they quickly rushed up and gathered together. In the blink of an eye, a thunderbolt giant like the one Luo Fan had seen in the Yi-Wood Myriad Tribulations formation was formed. The power contained in this thunderbolt giant was not as vast as the one in the Yi-Wood Myriad Tribulations formation, and it was smaller than the one in the Yi-Wood Myriad Tribulations formation. However, its power was more condensed, and its expression and body were more vivid. Clearly, it had gained a lot from its fight with Luo Fan in the Yi-Wood Myriad Tribulations formation. Chapter 303. Chapter 303. The final enlightenment. Naturally, the strong winds, lightning, and fire in the sky would not stop because of Taoist Tanmu's actions. After Lightning Lord Imu condensed the surrounding wind, lightning, and fire into a fireball, the boundless wind, lightning, and fire continued to pour down on the land within 100,000 miles. However, afterwards, the pouring strong winds, lightning, and fire were involuntarily pulled towards the basketball-sized fireball in Lightning Saint Imu's hands by an extremely strange attractive force. From afar, it looked as if a giant hole had been torn open in the sky, with countless strands of lightning, astral winds, and flames pouring down from the sky and pouring into Lightning Lord Imu's hands. It was as if Lightning Lord Imu had opened a giant umbrella made of lightning, astral winds, and flames, and thrust it into the layer of astral winds, lightning, and flames above. Compared to this huge scene, Lightning Saint Imu, who was nearly 100,000 feet tall, seemed tiny. He was so weak that he wasn't even worth mentioning. The entire shocking process lasted for 3 days and 3 nights before it stopped. 3 days and 3 nights later, the astral wind, lightning, fire, and 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 astral wind. Lightning, fire, and astral wind, 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 lightning, fire, without the bombardment of the strong winds, lightning, and fire. The huge hole that spanned a radius of 100,000 kilometers gradually closed up under the mysterious laws of the chaos world. At the same time, the fireball in Lightning Saint Imu's hands had grown to a diameter of 1,000 meters. Moreover, the entire ball of wind, lightning, and fireball was extremely condensed. It was like a colorful solid that emitted endless baleful aura. Just by looking at its appearance, one could tell how heavy it was and how terrifying its power was. In fact, the amount of strong winds, lightning, and fire contained within the fireball was enough to destroy Luo Fan's minor chiliocosm if it was allowed to explode. Gather! Lightning Saint Imu spat out softly, a look of relief and exhaustion on his face. After that, he exerted a little force with his hands, and then a strand of extremely mysterious and strange energy suddenly enveloped the 3 kilometers wide fireball of astral wind and lightning. Within this strange power, there seemed to be countless mysterious sounds of the great Tao, as if they were narrating some inconceivable truth of the world and drawing in the minds of all living beings. Being shrouded by such a mysterious force, The astral gale thunderbolt fireball gradually condensed into strands of mysterious and indescribable energy threads. These energy strands were extremely tough and pure. Although they were condensed from strong winds, lightning, and fire, they were filled with boundless vitality. Surrounding these energy threads were countless innate Ewood chi, which gradually wrapped around these energy threads. After being wrapped up by the innate Ewood chi, the energy strands began to rapidly spin and spin. Soon, an extremely complicated, indescribable outline of a human silhouette began to form. After the outline appeared, it was as if a black hole had suddenly appeared within the fireball. A terrifying suction force appeared out of thin air. The astral wind, thunder, fire, and astral wind, which had been raining down for 3 days and 3 nights, had completely disappeared in just a few breaths of time. It had been completely absorbed into that extremely complex and mysterious human silhouette. As the countless strong winds, lightning, and fire poured in, the outline of the human body was quickly filled out. In the blink of an eye, the original outline had turned into a white-haired, ruddy, white-bearded old man. From the looks of it, it was the appearance of Taoist sandalwood. Taoist, I am the only one in the world. Great Tao, reforge the body of a god. Lightning Saint Imu chanted. His body shook, and he transformed into a streak of light that rushed into the white-haired, ruddy, white-bearded old man's forehead. As he entered, the white-bearded old man's eyes flickered with divine light, gradually becoming profound and wise. It was as if he could see through all the mysteries of the world. I've finally succeeded. Is this the taste of freedom? The white-bearded old man clenched his fists as a faint smile appeared on his face. Although the white-bearded old man's body had absorbed a huge amount of astral wind, lightning, and fire, as well as lightning sovereign Imu's entire body, his power was only stable at the true immortal realm. The strength of his body was only that of an ordinary born Taoism aptitude. There was nothing special about it. As a matter of fact, the wind, lightning, fire, and boundless energy had surged into some inconceivable existence in the unseen world, exchanging for the freedom of Taoist Master Sandalwood's true spirit with the supreme great Tao. This was the true profundity of the technique that Luo Fan had created. Taoist Sandalwood pondered for a while, then raised his hand and waved lightly. The abnormally tall sandalwood tree in front of him shook and disappeared without a trace. With the disappearance of the sandalwood tree, the world that had originally been a forest became no different from the other parts of the untainted land. It even seemed a little desolate. It was impossible to tell that there was an innate God who had already reached the true immortal realm hidden in this world. At this moment, the scene in front of Taoist Sandalwood suddenly became slightly blurry. Then, a spherical formation of 10 feet in diameter gradually materialized from nothingness and gradually appeared. It was the space-time formation that Luo Fan had set up. After the formation appeared, a door very naturally appeared, facing Taoist Sandalwood. Taoist Sandalwood knew that this was an invitation from Luo Fan. He smiled slightly and did not hesitate. He stepped into the door and entered the void inside the space-time formation. I didn't think that Taoist friend would be able to cultivate that secret art in just 3 days. Congratulations. Luo Fan opened his eyes and smiled. Haha, it's all thanks to your mysterious technique. If not for that, how could I, Taoist Sandalwood, be where I am today? Taoist Sandalwood laughed. Since you've already regained your freedom, what plans do you have for the future? Luo Fan asked with a smile. There's no need to say more about my plans. I've been imprisoned here for hundreds of thousands of years. I haven't had a good look at this world yet. I plan to spend 10,000 years traveling through the untainted land and take a good look at this world that I grew up in. Taoist Sandalwood said with some emotion. That's the right thing to do. Luo Fan nodded. He understood Taoist Sandalwood's choice very well. However, don't worry, Taoist. I will definitely head to Bujo Mountain to meet you before the Great Tribulation of the primordial world arrives. After all, the Great Tribulation this time concerns the primordial world. If the living beings of Freedom Incarnation successfully occupy the primordial world, I'm afraid I won't be able to maintain my living space. I won't take it lightly, Taoist Sandalwood continued. That's good. I have a Dharma artifact here. Although it doesn't have much combat power, I can borrow your power to send information to me. I hope that if you discover anything unusual in the future, you can tell me, Luo Fan said with a smile. As he spoke, he waved his left hand. Dozens of mixed essence bluestones rushed out of his sleeve universe and kept transforming during the process. When they arrived in Luo Fan's hand, they had already turned into a stone mirror. It was simple, just like an ordinary bluestone. Taoist Sandalwood took the stone mirror and sensed it slightly. He was shocked by the wonderful ideas in it. He praised, "Such a Dharma artifact is indeed extraordinary." "Don't worry, Taoist. If I discover anything in the future, I will definitely not hide anything." "Thank you, Taoist." Luo Fan bowed and said, "Haha, now that the world is vast, I'll go." Taoist Sandalwood laughed loudly. As he spoke, his body shook and turned into a bolt of lightning. He rushed out of the door that Luo Fan had opened. In the blink of an eye, he had already cut through the void and shot toward the south. He was as fast as lightning and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Luo Fan smiled slightly. Taoist Sandalwood was quite powerful. With his help, he was even more confident that he would be able to survive the primordial world tribulation tens of thousands of years later. He raised his hand and waved gently. The door of the array closed again. After that, he slowly closed his eyes and continued to comprehend the great Wood Dao verification technique that flowed through his mind. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed in the space-time array. To the primordial world, that was a total of 50 years. On this day, Luo Fan suddenly had an epiphany. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the other half of the space-time array. His gaze passed through the barrier of the array and saw the deity of Bujo Mountain, who was immersed in the Tao realm in the space. At that moment, the deity of Bujo Mountain emitted an extremely rich and mysterious divine power. This divine power was extremely mysterious. It was even more mysterious than the chaotic vital energy. It contained countless mysterious mysteries, as if it could evolve all things in the world. As long as there was enough power, it could do anything. This divine power was more than 100 times more mysterious than what Luo Fan had seen before. However, it had undergone some kind of qualitative transformation. Obviously, it had made great progress. After carefully observing his cultivation, Luo Fan could not help but praise him. After being immersed in the Tao realm for more than 1,000 years, the deity of Bujo Mountain's cultivation realm had actually increased to the peak of the itinerant immortal realm. He only needed one last opportunity to become a perfected immortal. This great progress was more than 10 times stronger than before. With one move, heaven and earth light up. The supreme great way opens before my eyes. The deity of Bujo Mountain suddenly chanted and suddenly opened his eyes. As he opened his eyes, an extremely powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. With this aura, the divine power from his body surged out like a landslide. It kept accumulating and condensing above his head. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into the shadow of a strange tree that emitted a mysterious aura. This strange tree was very short. It was less than 10 feet tall, and its trunk was only the size of a baby's arm. Its branches and leaves were very sparse. At that moment there were only 3 branches and 36 leaves. However, each branch and each leaf seemed to be telling a mysterious truth. It seemed to represent some incredible mystery of the untainted world and control some rules of the heaven and earth. This mystery made the strange tree heavy and mysterious. It was like a mountain, like the sea, like the sun and the moon overlooking the world, Is this the tree of the world? Luo Fan looked at the shadow of the strange tree, and could not help but sigh. The tree of the world was a kind of achievement cultivated by the great Wood Dao verification technique. It was different from the fruit of the way, the primordial spirit, and the talisman deity. It was a kind of incorporeal existence. It was formed by the combination of the realm of Dao and some incredible existence in the heaven and earth. It could not be controlled like the cultivation achievements of the fruit of the way or the primordial spirit. The formation of the tree of the world meant that the deity of Buzhou Mountain had obtained the recognition of the great way of the untainted world. In the future, if he really condensed the tree of the world into an entity and let it grow, he would be able to completely control the supreme great way of the untainted world. He would be able to cultivate the great Wood Dao verification technique from another angle. This was an achievement that even perfected man Tan Mu, who first obtained the tree of the way, could not cultivate. It seems that this tree of the way is more suitable for gods like the deity of Buzhou Mountain. Luo Fan's mind flashed, and he had already understood. He raised his hand and waved it gently. The space-time array that had been completed collapsed with a bang. Luo Fan and the deity of Buzhou Mountain appeared out of thin air in the world where perfected man Tan Mu's original body was. After returning to the untainted world, the deity of Buzhou Mountain's long roar was suddenly filled with joy. At the same time, the wind and clouds surged in the sky, and a colorful glow appeared out of thin air. The world within a radius of 500 kilometers was enveloped by the colorful glow. Endless vitality was born out of thin air. In the blink of an eye, it merged with the endless connate Ewood Chi and gradually grew into a grassland. The multicolored light lasted for the time it took to brew a pot of tea, and when mountain god Buzhou stopped chanting, the multicolored light disappeared. Congratulations! Luo Fan saw that the deity of Buzhou Mountain had stopped roaring and went forward to congratulate him. Thank you for protecting me, benefactor. The deity of Buzhou Mountain hurriedly put away his tree of the world and bowed to thank him. Looking at his attitude, there was not the slightest difference from before. I'm just cultivating at the side. I didn't do anything to protect you. I don't deserve to thank you, Luo Fan said with a smile. Benefactor, I naturally don't need to thank you. However, where is Taoist brother Tan Mu now? Why don't I see him? The deity of Buzhou Mountain asked. He has already cultivated an incarnation and left. Luo Fan smiled faintly. I see. It's really a great opportunity for Taoist brother Tan Mu to meet you, benefactor. The deity of Buzhou Mountain sighed. Taoist brother Tan Mu had not cultivated an incarnation for hundreds of thousands of years. However, he was able to cultivate an incarnation and leave in just over 1,000 years. This was naturally Luo Fan's ability. No. It's a great opportunity for me to meet Taoist brother Tan Mu, and it's also a great opportunity for you, Luo Fan said with a laugh. That's right. Ha ha ha. The deity of Buzhou Mountain laughed. Since there was nothing else, Luo Fan would not stay here any longer. After exchanging their experiences over the years with the deity of Buzhou Mountain, he bid farewell and left. The deity of Buzhou Mountain also continued his mission of looking for innate gods. Looking at the deity of Buzhou Mountain, who had gone far away, Luo Fan suddenly understood. The next time he saw the deity of Buzhou Mountain, the deity of Buzhou Mountain would not be an individual immortal. At the very least, he would be a true immortal. This understanding came without any reason, but Luo Fan had an inexplicable confidence. He knew that this was inevitable, and a faint smile appeared on his face. They are all improving, but I can't slack off. These thoughts flashed in Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, his body turned into a long rainbow and went straight to the east, which was different from the deity of Buzhou Mountain and Taoist brother Tan Mu. In the next 10,000 years, Luo Fan did not think about anything else. He did not care about the great calamity of the untainted land in the future, nor did he care about meeting Apollo in the realm of Tautai after 10,000 years. Dragon? The meeting with Tautai was just to walk in the untainted land with peace of mind, observing and understanding the various supreme mysteries revealed during the evolution of the untainted land. During this process, his cultivation realm was unknowingly improving. He seemed to be slowly but steadily getting closer to the ethereal Tai fruit of the way, which seemed to exist but did not seem to exist. One day after 10,000 years, Luo Fan was in the depths of the untainted land, in a place that was 3 trillion miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Here, because there was a very huge geomagnetic quintessential essence in the ground, there was a strange scene of a mountain floating in the air, becoming a floating island. At this moment, Luo Fan was standing on a floating island with a radius of 10,000 miles, which was 10,000 miles above the ground. In the middle was a mountain that was 100,000 feet tall. There was a rather huge source of chaotic essence chi on this floating island. The chaotic essence chi that it emitted was transformed into some kind of vitality that was conducive to the birth and growth of living beings through some mysterious transformation. This made the floating island full of vitality. Not only were there flowers and trees condensed by wood chi, but there were also all kinds of simple living beings condensed by various kinds of vital chi. Because this place was 10,000 miles high in the sky, clouds were everywhere, and water vapor was everywhere, making the floating island look like a fairyland. There were more than 1,000 floating islands in this position, and the largest one was the one that Luo Fan was currently on. Looking down, there were many islands in the sea of clouds, and the vast land covered by the clouds below, as well as the undulating mountain ranges. Looking up, there were endless stars above his head, and the sky was high and the earth was wide. A feeling of freedom surged in his heart. In a trance, Luo Fan seemed to understand something. Traveling in the untainted land for 10,000 years was an extremely rare experience for Luo Fan. During this process, although he did not seriously cultivate in seclusion, his progress was greater than any period of time in the past. Ever since he came to the primordial world, he had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, allowing him to accumulate to an unbelievable level. Now, after 10,000 years of relaxation, these accumulations finally began to slowly evaporate. Gradually, some kind of change that could only be understood and not described in words occurred in Luo Fan.